Hello.
Are,
Oh,
are we in? I think we're in.
we should be in, although I see that it seems to be just giving people a black screen right now.
Well,
Why
they can
is
hear us.
that? Okay. All right, that's odd. Just a moment. Oh, now it's now it's showing a thing. Is it good now?
Foundry Virtual
Better, much.
Tabletop After Dark.
That was weird. I like my normal broadcast scene had, I think, its display capture piece like hidden, and I didn't notice that. All right. Well, I think we're good now. Welcome everybody. Hello. Happy Saturday. Happy holidays. How's our voice volume coming through for you all in chat? I'm gonna put a little background music on. I'll do a playlist from the wonderful tabletop RPG music. We'll get that balanced, and then let us know how we're sounding. Hello from me, and hello from my boon companion.
Yes, that would be me. Many of you know me as Anathema, also Nath, or Shane for those of you who happen to meet me in real life on occasion.
The elusive human name.
Invoke not my true name.
Yes, I will not invoke your true name. Well, or I might. I don't know. We'll see. Things might get spicy. All right. So, thank you all for joining us. It's great to see you all here. We are here to do a dev stream, as is our normal custom, but this is a special one because we are celebrating the impending launch of version 9 stable. It's something that we've been working on for a very, very long time. Well, I don't know. What's a maybe very, very long time is a bit hyperbolic, but we've been working on it since August, which is a pretty long time as things go in Foundry Virtual Tabletop world. So it's been, it's been a while. And we're really proud of how it's come together. It is, it's in a good place, and it's in a place that we think is ready for it to be stable, for folks to start using it. And we're really excited to flip the switch on that and to roll it out to all of you early next week. So
I caught a comment on Reddit or Twitter or something the other day wherein someone mentioned that they moved from Foundry '06 directly to '08, and it was like an entirely different software for them. And I'm beginning to wonder if that's what people experience when they go between major versions in general. Just we pack so many features in that they're just like, I have to relearn this all over again.
yeah, there's a lot, and so part of what we want to do in the stream today is kind of step through what we've done in development streams during the V9 cycle is sort of showcase features that are specific to that particular, step of the development process. But this is a good chance for us to sort of step back and recap like everything. Well, not everything, because we don't have enough time for that, but all of the main things that are in V9. And so that's kind of what we're going to do for the first part of the stream. Give you all like a survey of everything that all the major stuff that we've done. And then we'll do, obviously, of course, always community Q&A with you all during throughout the stream within reason, but then more specifically in the second half. So if you have questions while we're talking, do feel free to post them, although don't be offended if we don't get your questions right away. We will specifically do Q&A in the second half of the stream, so we might hold some of the questions until then. But feel free to ask. We'll probably pick a couple as we go. Shall we, without further ado, go ahead and jump in? Do we have any big announcements or small announcements that we want to make before we jump into the meat of the broadcast?
Nothing that immediately springs to mind. I think everything that we're planning to cover is all pretty straightforward.
We have had some really exciting premium content announcements recently that I can just touch on just a couple real quick. So we've had Warhammer releases from Cubicle 7 for both Age of Sigmar Soulbound as well as 40k Wrath and Glory, both of which are really exciting systems. It's so cool to see the Warhammer IP on Foundry VTT. That's just like such a kick for me. But these are both really great premium content modules for both of those systems.
We also saw Battle Zoo Bestiary for PF2E this week. Right?
Yep. Battle Zoo Bestiary for Pathfinder. So premium content for Pathfinder 2, over 100 monsters. It's sort of like a monster manual book, but it has a little bit more than that too, because it does have some additional like optional rules, some character archetypes, things like that. It's a very cool product, cool artwork, all the tokens and stuff, all the stuff you need for all these 100 of these monsters that you can use like right in your game. It's very cool. On the 5e side, we had some 5e content from Kobold Press with both Prepared and Prepared 2. So those are like Prepared and Prepared 2. They're both products of like game ready sort of like one-shot adventures that span different level ranges. So you can import them and they're set up and ready to go, and you can have a little like one-shot adventure for a party of almost any level. They're really nice as well. So there's some really great content that launched recently. We had new content from Ulysses Spila for DSA 5 as well. So it's all been happening. There's a new Dragon's Horn Tales Encounters Volume 5, and that's all just within the past week. Dungeon Crawl Classics. Actually, was that a new launch, or is that a new version that just came out for Sailors on a Starless Sea? Do you remember, Nath?
No,
I think it's a new version.
I'm not personally deeply ingrained in Dungeon Crawl Classics, so it's something that kind of evades my notice usually.
But yeah, really great new content launches to celebrate there for those of you who are looking for some more stuff. Yeah.
Didn't we also have our first like Steve Jackson Games GURPS related thing recently?
Is that out yet? I
don't think it's. Oh, that was just a Kickstarter announcement.
Yeah, that was a Kickstarter announcement. Still kind of coming later, I think. But there's a cool Kickstarter ongoing. All right. Well, let's go ahead and jump into the features of V9. But I think this is nice to kind of talk about some of that. Oh, also, we were at PAX last weekend, or I was, and it was really, really nice to see folks from the community. Those of you who were able to be there, it was really great to connect with you in person. The panel was nice. I think we got a recording of it. We hopefully will be able to post it to YouTube at some point. So stay tuned for that. And this video also will be posted to YouTube a little while down the road. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into an overview of V9. So let me just first recap for people like what is involved in this version. So on our release notes page on the website under the version 9 section, we've had, seven individual component releases building up to what will be a stable release. And so across each of these 7 releases, we've added a number of major features. The main focus of version 9, as was chosen by ourselves internally, as well as voted on by the community, were a couple of things. So the community vote was for card support, so we'll be talking about that, which is now added. Our kind of internal prioritization was for a new round of lighting improvements, which has really come off spectacularly well. And then we have a lot of sort of infrastructural enhancements and strengthening of the software that we've done as part of this update cycle also. So we're gonna kind of jump through those and kind of cover all of that in turn. This may be a little bit intense on the music. I'm not sure we're in the depth of the dungeon right now, so I'm gonna skip one there, but that will come later maybe as we get into this. All right, so I want to first talk briefly about our new approach to versioning. So that was one main thing that happens with V9, as we're calling it. Some of you may have picked up on that. We renegotiated the way that we were handling version numbers in the software. The reason we did that is because we felt that we needed to have a more transparent approach to what our software versions are in a way that was clear and concise and expressed the different use cases for different versions of the software for different individuals. So I'm going to go to our knowledge base page on this, and we have on our knowledge base, there's a page that describes, how are we doing our version numbers now? What is it that you should know about this? But basically, Foundry now has a major version that we're working on, and in that case, this is 9. It's version 9. It's a family of releases of the software that we are building. What's currently stable is version 8. And as part of version 9, there are many different individual builds or releases. Builds are numbered, and they are always unique. Releases are sort of more thematic that depend on what phase of development that we're in. So our phases of development that we're using: planning, where we initially scope out what we're going to do for the next version. For the next major version cycle. Then prototyping, where we are building new features that are kind of more experimental. So we're working on the main big stuff that's going to be in the focus of that version. Development, which is intended really for API developers, where we have implemented the underlying foundation for what is included in the new version, and we invite system and module developers. Such tense music for me describing this. Oh man, I'm just like, my heart's like boom, 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 boom.
Well, on the upside, the music apparently isn't audible to the viewers. So
oh, really?
It's just you pumping yourself up for this.
Okay, all right. Well, that's good to know. I can turn up the volume a little bit. It should be audible to you. But all right. So in the development phase, we are getting feedback from the API developers, module system developers in the community. In the testing phase, once we get past API development, we are getting feedback from general purpose users within the community. And that's where we are right now. And we are at the closing of the testing phase. And we will be very soon releasing a stable release for the new... All right, now I'm getting too loud. Okay, too loud. Let's go halfway between where we were. Where we are entering a stable release. So version 9 stable will have all of the features that we've developed across all 7 of these releases. Then they will be stable and ready for everyone to use. So that's a brief overview of our versioning scheme and versioning changes. This does show up both on the website as well as in the software. So if I say go back to the setup page, that's going to kill the music for a moment. When you select your software update channel, you're selecting from those phases of stable, testing, development, and prototype. Really, really recommend for everyone to stay on stable unless you really know what you're doing and have a strong reason to do otherwise. We have a little bit of info here that reinforces like which channel is intended for which type of user. So, Nath, anything you want to add on the versioning front?
Just that we've gotten a lot of feedback from the community developers who have been kind of trailing along with us all through the testing and dev API phases and that kind of thing. And overall, I think the switch to the versioning system is a good thing. I think the outcome has been positive. The resulting breaking changes during the feature testing and the previous API development phase, there haven't been a lot, and people seem to be satisfied that it all kind of happened in the prototyping phase.
Almost all.
Almost all.
We tried. We did try.
Certainly far less than previous, and I think a lot of the community developers have been pleasantly surprised to find that their modules just work in version 9 without having to do any major overhauls. The CSS changes were perhaps the most impactful, which is kind of crazy to say.
Yeah. I mean, Jansen in chat raises a good point, which... So what we'd been doing with the previous version scheme was kind of sticking with the development versioning that had been used since early alpha and just continuing with that scheme and continuing to increment it. The downside of that was that it gave some users the false impression that Foundry was not stable yet or wasn't like a released software yet because we hadn't achieved that sort of magical version 1 nomenclature. And I was a little bit stubborn about that because I felt like, and I still feel that the software isn't complete. It's not, we're not done working on it. We're always trying to make it better. But the version scheme that was being used wasn't really sensible for the way that we were actually making releases and intending users to interpret those releases. And so this is sort of just a more sane way to handle it that's clear. We don't need a sort of major minor patch version. We just have the major version of the software and the build number. And that's sufficient. It's a little bit simpler. It's a little bit more clear. And we hope that it will work well for all of you going forward. And we think it will. So that was one really big thing that we changed with version 9, although it's not actually any sort of code change. It's more a change in like how we're talking about our code. Getting into some of the actual code changes that were applied, though, we have the first one, which is probably the shiniest and most exciting for many of you, is the renovation of the adaptive lighting system. So, well, not just renovation, the addition of the adaptive lighting system. So previously, in V8, we had strictly additive lighting. And this is important for some reasons, because light does add to the luminosity, to the illumination of the scene, but it also multiplies. It also changes the appearance of textures that are underneath the light. And so now what we have is a hybrid adaptive approach, which is a blend between additive lighting and multiplicative lighting, which gives a really very pretty aesthetic in terms of how lights and light sources appear in the scene. And you can see as I move this light around how natural and beautiful it is in the way it's very bright outside when it's on the snow. This is a good example of why it's adaptive. The illumination, the luminosity of the light is affected by what's beneath it. So when there's a very white texture beneath the light, like this snow out here, it creates a much more luminous, a much brighter effect than when it's inside against this darker wood grain, where the eventual appearance of the light source is not just a byproduct of the configuration of that source, but it's a byproduct of what colors of pixels are underneath the light source. I think one of my favorite little demos of this is with the armor, say, of a hero that is wearing like plate armor. So let me grab, say, Krusk here. And as I bring the light over Krusk, you can see that the darker parts of Krusk's appearance react differently to the light than the lighter parts of his appearance. I'll make the light maybe smaller for a moment. So for example, you can see the way that the glow of the helmet changes as the light kind of comes over Krusk's location here. This is what makes it adaptive, and there's some really brilliant work done by the team and by Secret Fire, who's been a key contributor to this, to make this adaptive illumination possible. It's really beautiful, it feels good, it works well. It's something that I think that all of you are going to really love having available in your games. And it's very natural. You don't have to think too hard to use it. It kind of just works.
Sorry, I'm a little too distracted staring at the map that almost killed me.
I see. Yeah, Nath recognizes some of these maps from our Sunday game, but it's much nicer now. There's friendly people in the tavern. It's not a scene of near death. So how does this work, and why does it work, and what are we doing here? Well, there's a lot of individual components of the adaptive lighting system. So I think what I will do is maybe pull up a scene that doesn't have any lights on it and just go through and create some lights with you and show what some of the different features are that the system has. So let me switch over to a different map. We'll do the Smuggler's Hideout because I think it has a couple of different types of lights that it could have. Now I'm going to just delete all of the lights from this scene. So here we've got a map that's walled, but it has not yet been rigged up with lighting. So I'm going to talk you through what some of the lighting features can do here. So let's start with just sort of a simple fireplace, because it comes up very frequently as, producing a sort of torch-like animation. So as you all know, the interface for creating lights is the same. You just click and drag. By default in V9, when you click and drag to create a light source, you are getting an adaptive light source, not one of the legacy light sources. So I'll do, say 40/20 for this fireplace. When you pick a color, that's what's bringing in the adaptivity of the coloration. So you can choose a color. You can also choose an intensity of that color. And these are closely related. So a darker color with more intensity is going to be kind of similar to a lighter color with less intensity. They are related, but having these two different controls, it gives you a little bit of nuanced ability to configure your lights in a way that makes sense to you while you're doing it. So this sort of default appearance of a light with coloration applied is giving us this adaptive illumination, adaptive coloration of the scene. And you can see it looks nice as I move it under, into different rooms. But, we still want to configure it a little bit more. So what are some other things we can do with this light source as we're configuring it? There is a new layout of the light source configuration UI. So this sheet, this interface is new. Many of the options are the same, but there are also options that are new here. So there's a whole advanced options tab, and I'm going to spend a minute going through each of those in terms of what do these advanced options do. The first advanced option is that a light source may or may not be constrained by walls. If the light source is not constrained by walls, it's going to go through the wall and illuminate other rooms as if it's sort of a global light. What was previously called like a global light versus a local light, that drop-down is gone. It's now a checkbox for just, is this light constrained by walls or not? I can show you this pretty nicely on the map I was just on with the Winter Inn. If I take one of these lights and unconstrain it by walls, it's easy to see how the light is sort of both outside and inside. For certain effects, you need this. For others, you don't. By default, lights are constrained by walls, but you can turn that off if you need a different effect. Other things you can configure under the Advanced tab of your light source, whether or not the light source provides vision. So let me show what this means. I'm going to drop a token over in this room. This token has 5 feet of dim vision, so it can't really see anything. There's no light sources. It can see barely around itself, but it can't see anything else. If this light source over on the other side of the map were to provide vision, it would allow tokens to always see from that perspective, regardless of whether they have a direct line of sight or not. So if I turn that feature on, and then I select my token over here, notice that I can always see what's going on in this room, regardless of whether or not I have a direct line of sight to it. And it's because this light source is contributing vision to the scene. This is not something you're going to use very commonly. This is sort of relatively rare. It's an advanced feature. In certain circumstances, you may want this. It isn't something that you'll probably use for most of your light sources. I would encourage you to keep it probably disabled, and that's what it is by default. But it is something that for certain light sources, it's really valuable to be able to always expose visibility of a certain part of the map, regardless of where tokens are located.
One of my favorite tricks to pull with vision providing light sources is to put a large one right in the center of the map for maps where players are returning and they know the layout already, and just toggle it on for a split second after the scene loads to provide that fog of war clear.
Question from Shark who walks like a man, who says, name's confusing since all lights provide vision. Not exactly true, and this is part of getting the philosophy of Foundry's lighting articulated clearly. Vision and illumination are separate concepts. So a light provides illumination, absolutely, but it does not necessarily provide vision. If you light a candle in your bedroom, that candle produces light, it produces illumination, but you don't see it if you're in a different room. You don't see from the perspective of the candle under normal circumstances. Now, if it's a wizard's arcane eye that sheds some light and also lets you see where something is, that's a different story. But there is a separation between vision and illumination, and that's the difference between the sight layer and the lighting layer. So there is an important distinction there. Now, the checkbox of provides vision on a light source allows you to kind of push from one side of that boundary to the other, where a light source can then also provide a source of vision, which is not normally the case. Okay, other advanced options. There's a drop-down for coloration technique. I'm going to get to that in just a second. But first I want to talk about some of the other options. So luminosity. Luminosity it describes the fundamental brightness of the light. So this is a very cool thing that we've changed that I think works really well. It used to be that darkness sources and light sources were separate, where there was this kind of magic trick in Foundry where if you set a negative radius of your light source, it would become darkness. That was sort of a hidden feature. It was a little bit too secret, a little bit too hard to discover. So now we have a single luminosity slider, which will make a light brighter or dimmer while it's positive. So on the range of 0 to 1, luminosity affects how bright a light is. How much light does it add to the scene? However, the luminosity slider goes all the way to -1, where as you go to negative luminosity, it becomes a darkness source. So on the scale of negative to positive luminosity, you can have a very bright light or a very darkness source as you affect this slider across its entire range. Now, the default luminosity that's intended for normal light sources is 0.5, so halfway on the positive range. So remember, 0 to 1 is adding brightness to the scene, and halfway between 0 and 1, 0.5, that is the standard, that is sort of the default level of brightness that lights are expected to create. Another important checkbox that is new is gradual illumination. Now, gradual illumination, when it's on, it creates a light that gently fades to the edges of its radius. When gradual illumination is off, that light is sort of more rigidly defined in terms of the amount of bright radius versus... I'll take the color down so you can see this more easily, but I'll turn the luminosity up, maybe. So here you can more clearly see the bright radius versus the dim radius when gradual illumination is off. When it's on, it's more of a gentle, sort of seamless blur. With it on, with gradual illumination on, the light source looks more realistic. With gradual illumination off, it's maybe a little bit better if the radius of a light source has tactical implications for your game system. So like if knowing the area that's bright and knowing the area that's dim is important for game mechanics, you may find that with gradual illumination off, it's easier for you to tell what portion of the light source a token is located in. If what you want is your lights to look as pretty as possible, gradual illumination on is probably what you'll want. All right, so that's gradual illumination. Next up is, let's see, what's next? Next up is background saturation. Background saturation is fun. So what background saturation does is it will over or under saturate the color of pixels that are underneath the light. So as I turn up saturation, you'll notice we move towards warmer, more intense, eventually very intense colors that burst forth. So every color is saturated, every color is amplified. And you can tell the difference between the sort of saturated region as you look at, maybe as you watch this token sort of wander into the light, you can tell how the colors of the token become more and more saturated as they get closer to the light source. So playing with saturation can be a really nice way to make a light even more warming and even more sort of glowy, whether it's a naturally occurring fire or whether it's a magical effect. Now, by default, saturation at 0 is sort of the normal saturation color of the pixels. But like luminosity, this can both go to +1 and to -1. So as you send saturation towards -1, it removes saturation from the environment, and you can tell that everything is becoming less colorful. Everything is going towards eventually complete grayscale. So with saturation at -1, all of the color has been sucked out of the room, and we have a purely grayscale, a purely black and white environment. So you could use this for certain magical effects, magical darkness. You could use this for spell effects. You could use this just to make your house, your haunted house, a little bit more spooky. And so you can tell that the color sort of fades away at the boundary of this light, where we go from having color to having complete grayscale, if saturation is all the way at -1.
So we've got a question from Shark That Walks Like a Man, which I often see asked within the community, which is, can we expect these filters for lighting, such as saturation, etc., to be able to be applied to token vision in the future?
Yeah, so we didn't have time in V9 to do vision modes, but a lot of the architecture and development and design work that we did with the adaptive lighting system in V9 was specifically designed so that we could apply these same shader effects elsewhere. So I think, as you point out, there's a very obvious analog in terms of like this appearance is really what we would sort of want for certain like dark vision rule sets for games, but we want it from the perspective of the token vision, not from the perspective of the light source. That is absolutely in our plans, and token vision modes that have these same sorts of settings are going to be coming possibly in V10. Now I won't promise, because we have not done our prioritization pass for V10 yet. So exactly what's in V10 and exactly what's not in V10 yet is still to be determined. But the plan has always been, once we do this adaptive setup for lighting in V9, those same shaders and techniques would then be used for token vision to provide token vision modes, which will be one of our next major features. All right, so let's talk about contrast next. So like saturation, contrast goes from -1 to +1. If you turn up contrast on your light source, you'll get more visible differentiation between dark tones and light tones. So at an extreme level of contrast, it looks like this. Maybe doesn't look so pretty, but at more modest levels of elevated contrast, you may discover that for certain environments and for certain light sources, there's a look here that you really like. So, maybe not the best choice for this fireplace, but it is a slider that has a lot of value in a lot of situations for different types of light sources. On the opposite side of things, if I reduce contrast, things start looking a little bit more sort of washed out and hazy. Again, maybe not the best choice for this particular room, but if you have like a really smoky light, or one that kind of obscures vision a little bit, or like a fire that is really smoky, like there's certain effects that you could have by reducing contrast. Maybe you can combine it. Of course, all of these can be combined. So you can reduce contrast, you can reduce saturation together, you can reduce contrast while you make it a darkness source. There's all kinds of ways to play around with this and achieve really unique combinations for different situations. And I'm showing kind of the extreme cases of like -1 or +1 because it makes it more obvious on stream what the change is. But I should emphasize that just little adjustments to this slider that are much more subtle can often be really nice looking. Hey, thank you, anonymous gifter. That is incredibly generous of you. 50 tier 1 subs. Wow. Thank you so much. That is amazing. If you just received a sub, check your Twitch. If you're just watching in the background and listening, you may have just received a gift sub. Be sure to check that out. Thank you so much for your support. That is really kind of you. All right, so the last one is background shadows. Unlike others, this doesn't go negative because there's no way to kind of remove shadows, but we can exaggerate the presence of shadows in a scene. So as we increase the level of background shadows, things get kind of more ominous and murky. Now this is different than a darkness source. This is still a light source, so it's still contributing light. It's just that the light that it's making is kind of dirty. It has this sort of strange effect that like makes everything, it accentuates the dark tones in the scene. And so that's what it means to enhance shadows. So anything that's already a dark tone gets increasingly elevated. So those are all advanced sliders, and you can play around with those in combination to create some really unique effects. Now, I skipped over coloration technique, and this is like one of the most important things, because not only is this, all these sliders are ones that you can use with the adaptive luminance technique, but adaptive luminance is only one technique, and we actually have like 10 techniques. So the scope of possibilities here is really, really big. Let me show you what these 10 different techniques are. The first one, which is not the default, is called legacy coloration. With legacy coloration, it is a purely additive light. And so you see, as I increase the color intensity, it does produce a very strong positive addition of color, but it has the side effect of kind of washing out the scene a little bit, because it's sort of just this glow. It's not really a light, it's more of just there's sort of light everywhere. And so you can see the difference between legacy coloration and adaptive luminance, where legacy coloration isn't affected by what's beneath it. Like, this thing looks the same regardless of whether I put it. It's not adaptive to what else is in the scene. It's just a really bright yellow light. And it doesn't change depending on whether it's over top of water or over top of wood or over top of a carpet. If you use adaptive luminance, that's when it uses the adaptivity of what is beneath the light source, and it takes that into context when it's determining how to render the light. So that's the key difference between legacy and adaptive luminance.
We have a question here that I'll grab real quick from Kasai SV, which is, with the new lighting system and all the extra configuration options available in it, would you recommend that we make or use maps that don't have built-in light shading? So,
yeah, I tend to bake a little bit into the map in terms of shadowing or lighting, but I'm doing it in a much more subtle way than I used to. I think for me, if you are an artist creating maps, I think having a little bit of coloration, a little bit of certainly the difference between darks and lights, because that's factored into the way that the adaptive lighting system reacts to the map, is like having good contrast between shadow and light is important in your maps. That's what's going to make the adaptive lighting system look really good, is if you have good inherent contrast in the scene image. But packing a lot of color into your scene image really is maybe not so important. Moreover, it might not even be desirable anymore, because these adaptive shaders can add color really nicely in a way that feels organic and natural to your scene. So you can maybe consider doing a little bit less on the color dimension, but having good contrast between, darks and lights is something that is still useful.
Conversely, I think that the new adaptive lighting system will actually make it easier to handle maps that already do have baked-in lighting than perhaps the V8 lighting did.
What I found with my own maps with baked-in lighting is that it looks maybe a little bit better, but there's always the problem that if you have baked-in lighting, and this map does actually, you can tell that there's a sort of baked-in fireplace glow here. You can tell that it's a little bit lighter near the fireplace than over here. A problem with that is like you can't react as well to things that your players do, If it's baked in, you can't turn it off. If it's baked in, you can't change it. If it's baked in when your player says, well, I'm going to use thaumaturgy to make the light turn bright blue, you can't just do that with a click of the button and then everyone's like, whoa, nice. Because you still have this kind of yellow. I mean, it's okay. It still looks really nice. But you find yourself fighting a little bit the lighting that's baked into the map rather than being able to actually manipulate it during the course of a game session. So, that is something to consider. All right, so moving on, I want to talk about some of these other modes. So we talked about adaptive luminance, legacy coloration. Let's show off internal halo. Internal halo creates a very bright, mostly additive halo within the bright radius of the light. So if you had, say, a fire which is like very bright right around the source, but then it gets sort of dim further out. If you use this internal halo, you can get like a much brighter glow towards the origin that fades off more quickly. The next one is external halo. It's kind of the opposite. More of a rare case for this one, but it sort of inverts that, where if for some reason a light source gets weird towards the edges and it's more like clear in the center, I'm not sure why you'd use this mode, but it is an option that we can provide, and I'm sure people will come up with very clever ways to use this one. Color burn looks freaking crazy. Depends a lot on what's underneath it, color burn does. You have to play sort of carefully with the intensity of coloration if you're going to use color burn, but you can produce some very interesting effects with a color burn. It just sort of highlights darks and turns them to, like, it burns them in with the color that is otherwise prevalent in the light. How you use this is entirely up to you, but you can imagine creating some pretty awesome spell effects with something like this, and making these shaders available for people to use in other contexts is something that is definitely sort of like on our to-do list as part of things like vision mode. So something like this where you're just seeing things like kind of highlighted in this color, it's really interesting, and it can create a lot of interesting experiences. Like a detect magic or something like that. So there's some very neat options for color burn. Next mode is both. So there's both an internal and an external color burn, just like there's internal and external halo. That just affects whether the color burn happens specifically near the center of the light or near the outer edges of the light. So you can have an effect that sort of burns near the center, but not in the rest of the radius. Then we've got low absorption. I see someone asking, can I make it green and show what that looks like? Sure, let's make it green. Let's do that. There's lots of different ways to sort of play with this. I don't know exactly which color green is going to work out the best here, but you can play around with the color intensity, you can play around with the shade, the color of green that you use. You can play around with adding, if you add more contrast, you'll get a more clear, so like it takes away some of the extra sort of smokiness of the scene. If you add less contrast, it may be more of just sort of like a detection outline. So there's lots of like different ways to sort of play with this, and get an effect that you hopefully really like. But yeah, there's some cool stuff there. So let me go back to our just sort of torch colored light. Another one is low absorption. So low absorption is really interesting in that it does not. It's good for materials that don't reflect light, that do reflect light quite well. So it's low absorption, so that means a lot of the light would be kind of reflected by the surface. Now, on this wood surface, it might not be a great choice, but if you have certain surfaces like the snow of your winter inn outside, low absorption can be really clever because it mirrors the way that the material of the snow would react to this light. In contrast, you've got high absorption, which probably is not a good choice for snow, but is a good choice for a material that would dampen the appearance of light. So on this wood floor, if we change it to high absorption, not invert, if we change it to high absorption, you get that the coloration of the light is not as strong anymore. You still get a hint of it, but it does kind of reduce the amount to which that coloration like penetrates and is projected onto the pixels below it. Now, I'm making it sound a little bit smarter than it is. I don't want to like give people the wrong idea, really. Like, the software doesn't know that this is wood, and the software doesn't know that that's snow, and the software doesn't know that the scales of the Dragonborn's head are, you know, a silvery metallic. It's just making a guess based on the color of the pixel. So it's not intelligent to that degree that it knows what type of material is beneath it. But you know, there are different ways, different techniques that you can simulate different materials with these different modes. Nath, you were going to say something?
I was just going to chime in that for those out there who've played Red Dead Redemption 2, there's this kind of weather effect that imposes on your vision and kind of makes everything a lot more dark and gritty when a storm is inbound. And it is meant to mirror this kind of general lighting where things are just kind of low absorption. The storms are, there's like a storm cloud rolling in, that kind of thing. But you can end up with this using the low absorption light, you can actually adjust the contrast and achieve that in 2D, which I was thoroughly impressed to discover in version 9.
Yeah, there's some very cool stuff you can do with inverting absorption too. So people were asking about like night vision. So this is like a cool example of kind of like inverse absorption and how it can be used to produce some pretty wacky effects. So like this is, I think, a pretty cool, pretty compelling effect for certain vision modes or certain types of detections or things like that. It's pretty neat what you can do with this. Yeah, I like that one. That's a nice look. I'll leave it over here in this warehouse. The warehouse can be haunted.
Yeah. Stick that on a zombie and abruptly end up with a Fallout glowing one.
Yeah, we'll make this a haunted, ghostly light with low absorption. Spooky. Yeah, so we haven't even gotten to animations yet, which is certainly something that, that looks nice with some added contrast. Maybe a little bit lower saturation. There's something wrong happening in this warehouse, and your players will just sort of freak out when they come in here and see this and see how it affects the appearance of their token as well as they're like kind of walking through this fog. So there's like kind of like all kinds of fun stuff you can do here to to sort of make interesting experiences for your maps that are going to be memorable for you and for your players. All right, so those are the different coloration techniques that we have available. We do have animations to get through, although these are not necessarily new. It is important to emphasize that animations have been reworked under the new lighting system. So all of these animations are sort of polished up to be nicer looking. So we've got our sort of standard torch, which many of you know and love. That's good for this sort of fireplace, but I'll show some others in contrast to the torch. So a pulse, which kind of is a smooth in and out motion from the origin. We've got chroma, which is a color shift. The higher intensity, the more colors shift. The lower intensity, the more true it stays to the original color. Of course, these animations can all be made faster or slower. So like a very fast, very intense color shift is going to get pretty disco pretty fast. So, and you can see how beautiful that looks with the adaptive lighting of like affecting what's underneath the shader. It looks really, really nice. And if it were just using like the legacy coloration, it's still cool, but it's just not as nice. It's really not as nice when you're only having additive lighting applied. So that's chroma shift. There is a pulsing wave, which is kind of these circular sort of hypnotic sort of pulses out from the origin. Swirling fog, which is a sort of, well, it is what it says on the tin. It's a swirling fog. We've got sunburst, which has been refactored for the new lighting system. It looks very nice. Very nice sunburst that sort of pulses and rotates. Light dome, which is sort of it's easier to see on smaller lights what it looks like, but it sort of creates a sort of dome-like effect. Next up,
good for your protective shields.
Yep, mysterious emanation, pretty fun. It's a sort of a swirling, mesmerizing sort of swirl. One thing that's interesting now that I should point out is that all of these animations can do two new things that you couldn't do before. One is that you can set their speed to 0, so if you still want the visual effect of, say, like a hexagonal dome, or you want the visual effect of a sunburst, or the visual effect of a mysterious animation, you can have that just not animated, because there is now a speed 0, which just doesn't move. There is also when you are not on speed 0, there is a reverse direction, which you can tell when I check it, it just reverses. Oh, this is one of his funny songs. Thanks for the Ballad of Waterdeep, tabletop RPG music. It is a nice ballad, but I'll skip that one. You can reverse the direction, and so that's important for, say you have like a pulsing wave where when it is normally a pulsing wave, it's emanating out from the origin. If you reverse the direction of the pulsing wave, it sort of sucks the light into the origin. So that can be fairly fundamental in terms of creating a different narrative of what the effect is if you reverse the direction. All right, we've got hexadome. We've got ghostly light, sort of shimmering light, ghostly light pattern. Energy field, very nice. Roiling mass. So this is interesting. Roiling mass was one that was previously reserved strictly for darkness sources. So roiling mass, let me activate it, now produces this kind of bubble-like effect that can be used for darkness sources if you turn the luminosity negative. But it doesn't have to be used for darkness sources. It can be used for light sources now as well. Black hole also was originally, it used to be sort of darkness only, but it produces a certain animation. Might look good with a light source, might not look good with a light source, but it certainly works well with a darkness source in terms of creating sort of a ominous darkness. Again, if you reverse the direction of it, it's more like sucking things into the center of the black hole versus emanating out from it. So you can tell a different story depending on which direction you animate the animation in. Vortex, a fun new effect, sort of a swirling, fiery tornado-like effect. Looks really good with a sort of bright red. Well, good, I guess. There's probably very ominous, but, it looks nice. Let's see. Then we've got that's a new one. So these next one, Vortex, Bewitching Wave, Swirling Rainbow, Radial Rainbow, Fairy Light, these are all new in V9, didn't exist in V8. Bewitching Wave is kind of like the pulsing wave, but it's more wobbly. It's more sort of hypnotic, and it's not as structured. You can tell it's kind of like pulsing in a unusual or unpredictable fashion. Good for sort of a hypnosis type effect. Swirling Rainbow, very nice. We've got, I'll turn up the intensity. It's got like a swirling rainbow pattern, so it's kind of like a chroma shift, except instead of the whole light shifting chroma, the light swirls in a rainbow pattern. And we've got Radial Rainbow, which also is a rainbow effect. It's a chroma shift, but it's radial pulsing outwards from the center. And you can, again, switch the direction if you want it to be kind of coming into the center versus emanating out from the center. So those are nice new ones. And lastly, but certainly not least, we've got Fairy Light, which is, again, another rainbow effect that is kind of like random colored flickering sort of fog where the color and the fog pattern also alternate. So if you have sort of a mesmeric room, it's a disco room, but it's sort of like rippling colors on the surface of water. It's a really interesting looking effect, so we called it Fairy Light. It's very enchanting. All right, so those are different animations. As you can tell, they've been updated and reworked for V9, which is nice. I'm going to leave this as a nice sort of torch, and then I'm going to go ahead and decorate some of the rest of this scene. So I'll put some, candles over here. I'll use the same sort of torch. I'll make it maybe a smaller radius for some candles with a more gentle flicker. And so Nath, while I decorate this scene a little bit, do you want to highlight anything else for our viewers?
Well, one that always goes over well and was actually just requested by, I think it was Zeal a few minutes ago, is the usual test of RGB, lighting, and the blend.
Yeah, that's always a crowd pleaser, or usually a crowd pleaser. For these little...
Let's show it off and immediately discover the one bug that we have left in the lighting engine.
Yeah, probably. For these little magic lanterns, I'm going to do something other than a torch. I'll do like a more yellow light with a pulse. Yeah.
Oh, Zeal wants it with the chroma shift.
Oh, that's going to be fun. All right, yeah. Nothing can go wrong. We've tested this, right? Nothing can go wrong. It can't possibly fail to look beautiful, right?
Sure.
All right. Well, I've got my scene here set up with new lights, and it looks really nice. I'm just eager to go explore it now, but maybe not the creepy warehouse. All right. Let me pull up a map where I can do the RGB mix with a little bit of space to do that. Feywild Arena probably will work all right for that. I've got this space in the middle of the arena. All right, so we'll do, 30 dim, 15 bright. We'll do a red. And I'll do the normal non-animated light source at first. So there's a red. Then we'll get a green and a blue.
While you're setting this up, I'm just going to address an issue a question that's been raised a few times by different people. Which is the overall performance of the new lighting engine and whether or not it will improve performance for older machines. The short answer that I'll give is yes, the new lighting engine is more performant. However, there is a threshold where older machines are just older machines, and no matter how much we do to improve it, we can't make things work. So while the new lighting engine and the new way that we're detecting walls and vision and whatnot is overall more performant, and it will definitely, it will perform better on some machines that were previously struggling. It's not going to suddenly make your 12-year-old laptop run Foundry perfectly.
Yeah, so on the performance front, there was some really interesting results and sort of side effects of what we did. First I'll just, let people revel in the beautiful RGB mix we've got here. And while I talk about it, I'll switch it to, as Zeal requested, I'll switch it to Fairy Light, and we'll let people go nuts with that. Fairy Light, it's not going to produce as nice an RGB mix though, because it just kind of makes the whole area swirl. So I don't know if that gives you the desired effect or not that you were hoping for, but yeah.
It looks a little bit like watching the old Game of Life feed what was the dev's name for the Game of Life? Conway's Game of Life. It looks like they're almost competing as they overlap.
Yeah, that's right. I'll send it back to the sort of high intensity one. Maybe we'll make it. Here's what I'll do. We're just gonna play for a minute. I'll do pulse, but I'll do pulse with different speeds and intensities, so that they'll kind of overlap in a non-expected way. It's subtle though, because pulse kind of takes a bit of the brilliance out of the animation. I don't know. I don't want to waste too much time. We'll have to play around with that yourself, Zeal. Starting on Monday, you can show us your most impressive RGB combination effect. We can have a little community contest to blow our minds. But yeah, on the performance front, we did a lot of work on performance as part of this, and I'm going to comment on performance a little bit more in the very next bit that I talk about. But I think it's a good time to move on to that, because we've done a lot of work to improve the way that performance is handled. So going back to my hideout here, going back to my token, I'm going to sort of showcase something here. Let me give a bit of vision this time, just for the purposes of illustration. And I'll pull this over here. So I won't spend too much time on polygons. You all know that it's like my favorite thing that I love to show. But polygons are these things. So this is how we create the polygons for what a token sees within the scene. And I'm going to turn on an active debugging that's going to make it look a little bit laggy, and it's just because the debugging itself is a bit laggy. So when this token moves, these polygons are recomputed. And again, you're probably seeing it look a little bit jerky, and that's because drawing the debugging information here is what the slow part is. But yeah, the computation and the performance of computing these polygon regions has been super improved. It's way better than it was in V8, and it is incredibly accurate. So it is sort of pixel perfect now in terms of detecting the accuracy of the vision region, even at like very long distances. So yeah, it's a really great algorithm. It's a really great approach. And it powers not only vision like you're seeing here, but it powers lighting as well. So all of the lights that when you move the light around, this is how the light's area of effect is computed, is it's computing these polygon regions every time it needs to update the light source. And it's really performant, it's really fast, except when I guess, crashed something by doing too much debugging, maybe. I don't know. Live demos, folks, live demos. Eventually, I think I overflowed the number of debugging objects that I could draw on the canvas with that. That was fun. But yeah, outside of the aberrant use case of doing sort of real-time debugging, which fortunately isn't how you actually use the software, yeah, it works really well. Where did that light end up going when I crashed? I don't know. I have a stray light now somewhere where it disappeared on me. But yeah, so the polygons that generate these light sources, they're really performant, really good. Moreover, the shaders that are rendering the light sources are doing so in a sort of more optimized way right on the GPU. Even relatively modest GPUs will have a good experience with this. Because of the brilliance of GPUs being able to do what they're designed to do, which is massively in parallel sort of render pixels using these shaders. And so what we've been able to do as a component of this is we've made some other key performance improvements. We've reduced our reliance on screen-wide filters that improves performance. We've eliminated completely the default screen-wide MSAA, so multi-sample anti-aliasing, which is a computationally costly filter to apply to your entire screen every frame. There's no default MSAA. We don't need it anymore. Everything looks sharp without it. We take advantage of a Pixie extension library called Smooth Graphics to do that. So we get nice rendering of text and lines without anti-aliasing through the renders in the Smooth Graphics package. And so that works for things like hex grid, to have hex grid lines without anti-aliasing. So there's some really key performance improvements here that make the additions of this new system offset by performance gains where other things are now less expensive. Speaking of which, I better get on to talking about performance modes, I think, which when you configure your software, each client can now choose a different performance mode. So there's low, medium, high, and maximum. So here I'm on maximum performance mode, and you notice down at the bottom right, I'm getting 120 frames per second because my frame rate is uncapped on max performance mode. And so it's super smooth. But my laptop has a GPU that works well with maximum performance mode. Like I can render at 120 frames, and that works. My laptop is fine with maps that are this big with this many light sources. However, you can turn down the performance mode. So if I, for example, set this to low, this has a couple of effects. Light sources no longer look quite as good. There's now some like sharp edges where there used to be gentle blurs. My frame rate's now capped to 60. I could turn it down more than that if I wanted to, because there is a separate frame rate. But if you're, say, on like low performance mode at rendering at 20 frames per second, your experience isn't going to be amazing because it's not going to look like as great as Foundry does otherwise. But this is going to work on a lot of laptops, like a lot of GPUs that might otherwise struggle. So I think, I don't know. I see someone asking like, what are the requirements for max performance mode? I don't really know. It's kind of a fuzzy line. Honestly, as long as you have a discrete GPU from like a brand, like if you have an NVIDIA GPU, you're probably going to be able to use high or max performance mode. If you're more on like an integrated graphics card, you're maybe going to be better off with medium or low. We do automatically detect your performance mode the first time you encounter this system based on some attributes of your GPU. So this value will be initially auto-detected for you in terms of what probably is best. If you have a fairly modern, like discrete GPU, maximum performance mode is going to be no problem for you.
I'd state that if you end up with it auto-detecting and putting you on high, I'd certainly give it a try on maximum.
No one gets auto-detected to maximum. So this was us being a little bit conservative. The auto-detection will put you at low, medium, or high. You can choose to turn it up to maximum yourself if you want to try that. But yeah, there's a number of things that these performance modes affect. Some different aspects of like fidelity in how the light sources are rendered, as well as like capped versus uncapped frame rate, some aspects of MIP mapping, different things that are affected by this. But yeah, that's right. So we did a lot there with performance modes to try and improve things as well. All right, we spent a lot of time on lighting, which was good. That was a major component of V9, but I think it's now time to talk a little bit about cards. This was the other big feature that V9 added. So let's talk about card support. Although actually one thing I want to do before doing that, I want to show just a little comparison. So here's a scene, Nomad Camp. I'm going to go to the demo, the web demo. You guys in the stream are all going to like log into the web demo and harass me right now. I'm sure. But so I'll do like a little before after. So here on screen, this is the web demo running V8. There's a couple people in here playing around. These light sources on the map. So this Nomad Camp map has darkness of 0.8. There's light sources, torches. They add illumination. They try and add color. Let me like turn up the color intensity. They kind of add color. It sort of washes out this is what you would have on Foundry V8. I want you to look at the animation of the shadows as I drag this token. And I don't know how well it's coming through on stream, but if you look at the animation of, say, the site polygons, there's a little bit of like hiccuping to it. They kind of flicker a little bit. They kind of are a little bit like not buttery smooth. And, you know, this is how things look for those of you who are currently on V9 stable. So let's go look at the same scene in, V8 stable. That's how it looks in V8 stable. So this is how it looks in V9, and immediately you can tell, I'll flip back and forth a little bit, you can tell the appearance difference of the lighting, where the new adaptive lighting is a much like more organic, much warmer glow on the scene. And as I drag the token around and you look at the smoothness of the lighting polygons, there's no jitter, they're buttery smooth. None of that sort of flickering is all gone, and that's gone because of the new precision of our polygon computation. So the before after here is like super favorable. I think I hope it's coming through on stream that like this is V9. I'll go back. This is V8. So the V8 one, you know, it was okay. It was pretty good. Good for a VTT, I think. I'm not proud of it, but I am really proud of this, which is V9, and the difference that it makes, not just in terms of quality and fidelity, but also in terms of performance. For all those reasons, it's a really big update for us. All right.
For those out in the audience, I actually, as part of our internal testing for the V9 engine, myself and Cody, who you may be familiar with, C. Swindrowski on the Discord server, we created a map with 18,000 walls and close to 100 light sources. Actually, 250 light sources. And loaded it successfully in V9's lighting engine.
Yeah.
It was not what I would call performant. The frame rate was less than 10 frames per second, but the fact that it loaded at all in V9 compared to killing the server in V8, that's how performant this is.
I don't have that one on my machine, but should I risk the 10,000 wall map live on stream, or should I not risk it?
Sure, give it a try. What's the worst that can happen?
Yeah, my stream might crash, but no, we'll hope not. I'm going to activate this 10,000 wall map. It might take a minute to load for the first... Oh, that was pretty fast. All right, so this is 10,000 walls, and like several... Let's look at the... I haven't talked about this support feature yet, but I'll get to that in a minute. So we've got 300 light sources, about 10,000 walls, 30 tokens, and I have on a limited vision angle at the moment. Let me turn that off. The 10,000 wall map is usable. I even can sort of see things animating. I'm only getting like 45 frames per second, and it's a little bit stuttery. It's not the most beautiful thing, but this is a map with 10,000 walls. Come on. So, you know, it's very impressive that our new lighting system is able to accommodate this. So it's 16,000 pixels square with 10,000 walls that are computed in the polygon. So if I show you what that polygon looks like, I'll blind you for a moment. It has to compute. Let's see if I can show it. Yeah, so this is what it has to compute every time that you move around in this map. So the fact that it's doing that so performantly is a testament to how efficient the algorithm is. So, yeah.
We made 3 of these. 2 that were around the 10,000 wall mark, and 1 that was at 18,000. And they were designed specifically to make the server crash on any hardware, and they work, I won't say well in V9, but they work in V9.
They work to a degree that is fairly impressive. So yeah, we're very pleased with it. But I better move on from lighting at the moment and talk about cards. So cards was the other major feature in V9, and we added card support. So there's a new tab in the sidebar. It is just to the right of rollable tables. And in this sidebar tab, you can create and manage your use of cards within the system. So cards have three major types. When I create a set of cards, there are three types to consider. There are decks, hands, and piles. Decks are collections of cards that are sort of pre-packaged together. I mean, everyone knows what a card deck is, I think. So, hopefully that's self-explanatory. Hands and piles may be a little bit less explanatory. So hands is designed to be a collection of cards that is temporarily owned by a specific player. And a pile is a collection of cards that is designed to be kind of shared between players or just for one specific player. So you might have like your deck that you're drawing from, your hand where you hold your cards, and you might have like a discard pile where you put cards when you play them to the tabletop. So the reason for a differentiation between deck and pile is that cards fundamentally belong to a deck. That's kind of where they come from. So any individual cards that exist in the ecosystem, they at one point were created as part of a deck. Cards can temporarily belong to hands or piles, but at the end of the day, when you reset your deck, all of those cards go back into the deck that they came from. So I'm going to create some new stuff. I have some already, but when I create a card stack, I'll want to start by creating a deck. So I'll just call this like poker deck. And we provide you with a preset for a poker deck with either dark cards or light cards, face color. But this preset concept is one that module developers can extend. So if your game system uses like a specific deck type, you can have preset decks that are available in this dropdown that module developers can extend this and add additional preset deck configurations. I'm going to create a poker deck, and this sheet that pops out is the basic configuration sheet for the poker deck. So it has all of the cards, all 52 cards in it. And I have, as the GM here, I have permission to configure the deck. I can edit individual cards. I can configure the faces of the card, what they look like, what the back looks like, what the text is, whether there's a text description of the cards, all kinds of stuff like this. I can configure all of it as the game master. I also can mark I also can see whether certain cards have been drawn or not. I'll come back to that in a minute. I can flip cards to be either sort of face up or face down by default in the deck, although there is better face up, face down control in individual hands as well. I can shuffle the deck. So when I shuffle the deck, it will randomize the order. As the game master, I can see the order the deck is shuffled in. But like all documents, cards have permission control. So for my players, I could say make the players have limited visibility of the deck. They'll know the deck exists, they can draw off of the deck, but they don't get to see the order of cards inside the deck. So different permission levels have different visibility into what the deck can do. I also can temporarily change the sort mode. So if I want to see it in alphabetical order versus see it in shuffled order, I can do that. I can reshuffle the deck as many times as I want. Let me create a hand. So I'll call this demo stream hand. So a hand starts out without any cards in it, but as you can see, the hand would be able to draw or pass cards that are in the hand. I'll also create a pile. I'll call it, stream discard pile. So some operations that you can do with these various hands, decks, and piles. And you notice as I was shuffling the deck, there's some chat notifications here that confirm what was happening. So suppose as a player from my hand, I want to draw cards from the deck. I can do that. I can click draw, and there's a dialog where I can choose which deck I want to draw from. I'll call this the Twitch stream deck, so I don't confuse it with some others. I can draw cards from the Twitch stream deck. I can say, I want to draw 10 cards. I want to draw them at random, and I want them to be face down when I draw them. So there's a lot of control you have over, like, how am I drawing cards into my hand? I'll click this, and I can see in chat that I drew 10 cards from the deck, and I can see that I don't know what they are because they're all unknown. They're all face down. Now I can turn these cards face up, either all of them or individually. Say I want to turn the first card face up. I'll see, oh, the first card was my 9 of clubs. Over in the deck view, I see that the 9 of clubs was in fact drawn, so this check mark has been checked, so I can see, oh, this is in someone's hand right now. In my hand, I have control over this deck. I can turn all of the cards face up. I can turn some of them, keep some of them face down. It's up to you if you have permission over your hand, what you do there. There is also, in terms of the pile, so when I'm in my hand, I can pass certain cards to the discard pile. So say I have to discard my top 3 cards. And to be clear, in my hand, I can reorder my cards as well. So I can drag and drop cards inside the hand to reorder them. Suppose the rules of the game I'm playing say, okay, now I have to discard my top 3 cards. I can pass those cards to, say, the discard pile, and I'd pass 3 cards, top first. I can choose whether they go to the discard pile face up or face down. In this case, we'll do face up. So there we go. I pass 3 cards to the discard pile. Those cards are in there now, face up. At the end of the day, say you're done playing your game of cards, you can reset the deck. So the Game Master on the deck view, I can click the reset button. All of the cards that belong to that deck are going to get sucked back into the deck where they originally came from. So that emptied the cards out of my hand. It emptied the cards out of the discard pile. Let me show a different way that cards can get into someone's hand. So if I click, I'll shuffle the deck again, and then I'll deal. I can deal cards from the deck into specific hands. So I'll choose that I want to deal, say, 6 cards off of the top of the deck, face up to the demo stream hand. I can see in my deck view that the first 6 cards were dealt to the hand. They're face up. I got a notification that that happened. So yeah, it's very simple workflows here. You can also drag and drop cards from like one hand into the pile if you have permission to do that. It depends on whether you have permission over the pile or not. Another thing I can do is with individual cards in my hand, there's an arrow to the right of each card where it gives you a play dialog. So when I click the card, say the 10 of clubs, I get a nice little pop out that shows me the face of the card. It lets me choose where I want to play it to. So I could play it to someone else's hand. I could play it to a pile. So say I'll play the 10 of clubs to the discard pile, but I want to play it face down. The play dialog lets me do that and get a notification that occurred. So all of the different sort of workflows that you need to play games of cards are, I think, supported here. And we really look forward to seeing what system developers and module developers do with this because, it's going to be really exciting to see game systems that use cards showing up, as well as quality of life tools like, everyone jokes about like cards so nice, but I don't think that's really a joke. I'm sure someone is going to make, and Zeal's already hard at work in this, someone's going to make a really beautiful UI for like visually showing cards being played and stuff like that. And I can't wait to see that. I think what we've really focused on with V9 is all of the underlying data structures and machinery that's needed in order to support playing games of cards in Foundry VTT. And Nath, you're very passionate about cards and card-based games. Why don't you talk through some of the things that I may not have mentioned yet?
So it's important for everyone to know that, of course, as with a lot of the features of Foundry VTT, we focus on trying to keep it system agnostic where we can. So a lot of the features for card support are built with no particular game system in mind. That means that community developers who want to implement card systems for their particular game, we enable that framework. We make it possible with our data structures. We try and build in a way that keeps it so that we're not imposing our view of what a card is or what a card game should be. And that makes it possible to do things like build a game system around having cards as the primary method of resolution. There's a lot of stuff we've built in that we wish we could have taken further for this, but we have to draw the line somewhere with support. So, like, things like playing a card on the canvas for everyone to see, or arranging your cards visually in like a nice graphical hand representation. That's something that we feel is better left to the community developers for right now. And if we come back, when we come back for an inevitable card support V2, we'll look into further support then. But in the background, behind all of this, the data framework is there. If you hit the edit card dialog, you can actually see that we've made arrangements, we've got the data, we've given the data a home for things like the default dimensions of the card image. So if you wanted to have your module or system interpret what to do when you drag a card and put it on the canvas, that data is there, it's supported. Right now, dropping a card on the canvas doesn't do anything, but there's nothing preventing a module developer from doing so, or preventing us from coming back and doing so in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so that's kind of an overview of cards. I think there's probably not too much else to show, except we do package 2 sets of card artwork with the system. So I hope you've been enjoying seeing some of these. NAF did a great job with putting together these card backs and faces that you can use there's sort of a light theme and a dark theme for 2 different poker decks that come with Foundry VTT V9. And we look forward to seeing the amazing artwork that community creators are going to have for, Taroka decks or tarot cards or other different sort of card game systems. Like, we can't wait to see that all get created and have that amazing like card artwork in the system. So very excited to see that come together. All right, one last thing to mention about cards is that you can embed them in articles. So, for example, you can drag and drop your like card deck into a journal entry, and it will give a link to it. Same with card like hands or piles. You can also paste those into the chat log. So, like, if you want to drop a link to someone's hand into chat, I didn't mean to send that in character, but yeah, you can paste a link in chat. So, dynamic document links are supported for cards. And yeah, so let's talk a little bit now about key bindings, because that's another major feature that we spent a lot of time on in V9. So on the setup cogwheel menu, there is a new button right under configure settings for configure controls. This is our new key bindings interface. So everyone can, at a per client level, so each individual machine each individual computer that uses Foundry VTT can configure your own key bindings. So for example, The key bindings UI, it separates on the left-hand side different categories of key bindings. There's two categories for core controls. Systems, modules that register their own key bindings, those are going to show up in this left sidebar, much like they do with the module installation UI on the setup page. So if you have a module or system that registers key bindings, you're going to have show up as a category here on the left panel. The core key bindings, this interface serves to both kind of allow you to edit as well as inform you about how the software works. So it's designed to serve both purposes of discoverability as well as customizability. So it lists all of the controls that you can perform in the software as well as what their keybind values are. Key bindings that are gray like this are ones that are, and they have a lock icon, are ones that are configured as uneditable. Meaning that Control A, for example, is always going to select all objects. That's kind of an OS level behavior, and so we didn't feel like it made sense for Control A to be rebindable, because that would then start to deviate from the way that your operating system works. Similarly, like the delete key will always delete a token, but the backspace key we didn't feel as strongly about. So the backspace key, for example, can be rebound. I see a question about Mac. If you are on Mac OS, this will show as the Mac icon. So it will show as like Command A, not Control A. So it is sort of hardware sensitive in that regard. So some of these can be rebound, some of these cannot be. So for example, like if I wanted to take cycle canvas view, which is tab by default. So as I hit tab, I'm alternating back and forth between these tokens. If I wanted to rebind cycle canvas view to, let's say, semicolon, I can edit this keybind by either clicking the edit binding button or double clicking on the binding itself. Once it's editable, I can enter a new key of my choosing and save it. And then you can't see my keyboard, but I assure you that I am now hitting the semicolon button to cycle between these tokens. And the tab button, which I'm hitting now, is doing not much. So it does work. It does what it says it does. It's a good system. You can reset all of your key bindings back to the default values if you need to. And you can add additional key bindings for settings. So suppose I want tab to cycle between these two, but I also want semicolon to. You can add additional bindings that will perform the same role. So now either semicolon or tab will perform the same action within the ecosystem. Let's see. So things like T for targeting a token. This is stuff that you can then rebind to any key that you want. There's a lot of flexibility here, and it's got a good underlying API that allows for modules and systems to register their own key binding actions. So a quick word on terminology, just for the developers in the audience. We talk about actions, and an action is the individual line item. So an action is a thing that should happen when a certain activation condition is met. And then we talk about bindings, which is what association between keyboard key and action exists. So various keyboard keys will trigger a certain action to happen. So as you're experimenting with this API, you'll see things that refer to actions, and you'll see things that refer to bindings. And so that's the difference between the two. Each action can have multiple bindings. Some of those bindings may be editable, some of them may be uneditable, as I demonstrated already.
So we've got some questions from the audience about what happens when one or more keys that are bound conflict, particularly when it comes to module development.
Okay. So when keys conflict, there is a warning icon that gets shown that if you hover over it, it will tell you what it conflicts with. So for example, T for target, if I were to then go and map cycle canvas view also to T, when I attempt to do that, there is a real-time warning notification that tells me that this is going to conflict with some other key assignment. And so, keys that are clear, in like R, where nothing else is bound to R, will be clear of that notification, but keys like T or C or A or D, which already have something bound to that, will show a alert that there is a conflict. Now, not all conflicts are necessarily bad. For example, move along measured ruler, which is a thing that happens on space, does conflict with pausing the game, which also happens on space. That's our keyboard assignment that we use by default, and so even in our default keyboard assignment, there is a conflict, but those two actions happen with very different contexts, and so we have a prioritization queue that when a keystroke could trigger a set of actions, those actions are prioritized and worked through, and the first action, which self-reports as having handled the keystroke, will prevent further actions from handling that keystroke. So when I press space to move along my measured ruler, that is not pausing the game, because moving along the measured ruler returns to the calling function that it handled the keystroke, and so it doesn't need to pause. But if I hit space without having a measured ruler active, then I am in fact toggling pause of the game. So there is a bit of a cage fight, as Spoider mentions in chat. It is up to the module development community to please register responsibly. There are 3 prioritization queues you can answer that you can self-select into. You can self-select as low priority, normal priority, or high priority, and within that queue you will be ordered relative to other modules that have also activated on the same binding. So there is some control over it, but we encourage you all to try and be thoughtful and respectful about what bindings you register and what your defaults are. But ultimately, the point of and the benefit of this UI is that users can then change it. So if we don't know what combination of modules you're going to choose to use, and so being able to rebind all of these keyboard controls allows you for whatever combination of modules that enables whatever combination of key binding actions to come up with a control set that works for you and that doesn't collide. So we're really proud of this, and I say we a lot, but I really should give a specific shout out to Cody, who did really tremendous work on this system. It was a lot of work. It was a lot of hard work, a lot of design discussion, a lot of effort that went into keybind management. And so hope you all appreciate your thanks, communicate your appreciation and thanks to Cody when you get a chance to do that.
That's a very good question from Freeze. Do Stream Deck buttons work for this? Have you tried?
I haven't. That's a great thing to check out. I mean, I do have a Stream Deck. I just don't have it plugged in right now. I should give that a shot. We did do some work to make sure to emulate gamepad controls. So it's not really full-featured gamepad support yet. Some more work is needed, but I can have like an Xbox controller that I can use the thumbsticks or the buttons to perform certain actions, like moving around a token. So that's a pretty cool little thing that is now enabled because of this. We're able to use the gamepad API to emulate gamepad actions as button presses, and since that works with the key binding API, you can then bind gamepad actions to actions in Foundry. So in theory, it should work with a Stream Deck as long as there's a way to detect that peripheral and to emulate those button presses as keyboard events. All right, cool. One important question from LazyTron XL about will existing lights just be set to legacy on update? I should have mentioned that. The answer is no, because we wanted to take the solution here that we thought would be the path of least required rework. We feel that the adaptive luminance shader is the default, the new best one, and so what will happen when you bring your existing scenes forward from V8 into V9 is that those light sources will be automatically converted to use adaptive luminance. So, for example, in my in my Patreon battle maps module, this is a map that I haven't touched since the V8 version. So all of these torches that were migrated forward, they all got migrated to come in as adaptive luminance. They all got migrated to come in as, I think gradual illumination in this case was off by default, but we've since changed that. So your existing maps will come in and auto-migrate to what we feel like is the best new appearance for lighting, and we've been careful that migration tries to stay true to the original aesthetic. So, more intense lights will be more intense still, less intense lights will be less intense still, but everything should just sort of automatically look better. If you want to go back to the legacy illumination shader yourself, you would then have to make that selection to go back to legacy coloration. All right, let's move on a bit. I know this has been quite a marathon, but there's a lot of minor features I really want to highlight, and I think it's important to do that. So how are you doing, Nath? Should we take a short break, or should we go ahead and crunch through some more features first? I'm
always good to keep going.
All right. Let's keep going then. So these are not major features, but I do want to highlight a number of important features, some of them quite big and really nice, that have been added in V9. So more efficient compendium index caching. So when you first enter your world, we added a thing previously where compendium packs are indexed on server launch. This was something that could create a bit of initial slowdown in loading into your world. That's more efficient now. The compendium indexing system is more efficient now. So some of the slowdowns that people have struggled with a little bit in V8, as well as some early V9 versions, have been improved upon. And so your experience working with compendium content that you've not yet imported into your world is going to be even better. So I really do encourage users to take advantage of compendium packs as much as possible, not just ones that come from modules, but ones that you yourself create as an archival mechanism for storing content yourself, because it will improve the performance of your Foundry experience. It absolutely will. If you use compendium packs for content that you don't actively need within your session, so if you have monsters that you used at one point, but they're not you don't anticipate needing them for the next game, storing those in a compendium pack will speed up your game. Any comments about compendium packs from you, Nath, while I'm beating that drum?
Use compendium packs.
Use compendium
them all
packs.
The time.
Yeah. Use them much more than most of you do. We really suggest it. So next up, speaking of compendium packs, when you import or export content from a compendium, there is now the ability to retain the identifiers of that content when it goes into the compendium. So this is more for people making modules, creating packages. Say I have all of these demo monsters and I wanted to package my demo monsters into a world level actors compendium. So I'd say actor, my monsters. I'll create a compendium pack for my monsters. If I want to put all of these monsters into my compendium pack, I can right click on the folder, export to compendium. One of the new things that I can specifically do here is keep the existing document IDs from my world, so that those IDs will remain the same in the compendium pack and potentially remain the same when I import that compendium back into my world, although that can lead to some collisions. But this allows for people that are preparing adventure content or modules to keep the IDs in a way that maintains cross-document relationships. So if I do that, with a click of a button, I've archived 34 actors into my monsters compendium. Oh, I think I did it to the wrong one. Maybe I selected the wrong compendium just now. Where did I just put these monsters? Oh, I put them into the D&D Monsters SRD compendium. Don't do that, because that will be erased when you update your D&D system. Don't do that. That's not a good idea. In fact, this should be locked, so I don't do that. If a compendium is locked, you can't export to it. But yeah, if I export all this stuff to my monsters, yeah, there you go. So all of these 34 monsters that I just dumped in here, I have access to at any time. But when I, if I then delete them from my world load would not include that data. So it's going to speed everything up. But yeah, okay. So that's an important thing that we added support for is keeping document IDs. The same is true when you import all content. The dialog to import all content allows you to keep document IDs the same. So just to put my money where my mouth is, what I can do is, here's what I'll do. I'll drop an acolyte in from the world. This acolyte is linked to the actor. I will then delete all of my demo monsters from my world. The acolyte, if I refresh my software, you'll see that this acolyte is no longer linked to the acolyte actor because I've removed that acolyte actor from my world. So I get an error warning messages, references an actor that no longer exists. I can take my monsters compendium, I can import all the content, I'll keep document IDs the same, and now I can open my acolyte sheet once again because it is reassociated with the same ID'd actor on the far side of the import. So basically this just means people that are setting up pre-configured content, pre-configured worlds, pre-configured modules, adventure type stuff, they'll be able to rely on their document IDs a lot more strongly than they have historically speaking. I did lose my folder color though. That's an unfortunate side effect. All right, next up is one thing. This is sort of a small thing, but it's for module developers specifically, so I wanted to mention it. Active effects. If you have an active effect change mode, you can declare a custom change mode for your active effect in the data structure, which will always be interpreted as a custom mode. So you used to only be able to choose from like add, subtract, add, multiply, override, those existing change modes. You can now set a custom numeric change mode, which you're responsible for handling it if that active effect change mode is present. But that's a key tool that module and system developers can use to have more control over having different types of active effects. Because when you see an active effect with a specific numeric change mode, that you can maintain your own enumeration of like special change modes. You could have an active effect that like, multiplies by 3, subtracts 4, takes the greater of A and B, and then math floors it after dividing by 2. And like you can have all kinds of custom logic that you maintain yourself for like how to apply a certain type of effect that you can use those custom change modes to index and to identify. Next up, macro directory. The macro directory of all the macros that you have created or have access to in your world, they now can have folders. So like weapon attacks, you can have folder organization inside your macros directory now. Little thing, but it's kind of overdue in adding it. So that's a nice addition. Again, another one, we added improvements. Not just improvements, we fixed a key issue on the server side with semaphore concurrency control with regards to multiple embedded document updates within the same parent document happening simultaneously. We had added a semaphore to control this for parent documents in a previous update, and it did a good job of making sure that like when you update the same actor twice at the same time, those are concurrency controlled and there's not a race condition, but we didn't have the right type of concurrency control for embedded documents, like multiple updates to items owned by an actor at the same time. So that's a key thing that can cause some bugs in V8 that now performs better and correctly in V9. So you won't have those sorts of race conditions where multiple embedded documents within the same parent run into that sort of concurrency issue.
for those of you out there in the audience whose eyes glazed over a little bit like mine did during that very technical description, the short version for how this appears for the average user is you could end up with situations where if, for example, multiple token updates were being performed at once, you could end up with one or more tokens becoming desynced between users.
Yeah, and the alpaca doesn't like it, so...
That is actually an African gray parrot.
Oh, that was your bird? No, I could have sworn that wasn't... I thought I've grown used to telling the difference, but yeah, your bird got me. The bird doesn't like it when that happens, so... yeah, anyway, so that's a really good improvement in V9 that just makes the software just work better. Because you never want to be in a situation where, like, the token position is desynced for one player versus another because they both had, kind of different perspective. Like, those updates happened at the same time and they got out of sync. All right. Canvas features. So in terms of developers out there, we have new Canvas groups. So it used to be that the game canvas was kind of non-hierarchical and that there was the canvas, and then directly inside that, there's about like 10 or 13 layers, all directly as children of the main canvas stage. Now there's more of a hierarchy structure where the main canvas stage has inside it 3 canvas groups. There's the primary canvas group, which is sort of depicts what is visible in the scene, so the background, the tokens, the foreground. Then there's the effects group, which is additional aesthetic effects placed on top of that, so that's where lighting is, that's where weather effects are. Then there's the interface group, which is UI controls, things that let you configure things on the canvas. So like, for example, when I place scene notes or use the token HUD, those are in the interface group. So I mentioned before that one of the key performance wins we had was moving away from MSAA. We have MSAA disabled for the entire canvas now, which is a really amazing thing for performance. And the reason we can do that is because we've added this utility called smooth graphics. So let me, for example, create like a hex grid map using a hexagonal grid. I'll make the grid very opaque so it's easy to see. So these hexes, as I zoom in and zoom out, they're very precise lines, the hexes are. And that ability to draw those precise, smooth lines without having anti-aliasing present on the entire canvas was a real impressive technical achievement that is enabled by a new Pixie extension package that we're using that actually recently our very own Dev Numbers, as we like to call him in our community, has become a contributor and a maintainer of that package, which is very cool to see folks that are involved in the Foundry community also involved in the Pixie community. But the ability to draw these diagonal hex lines without aliasing is really important because you don't want them to look jagged and ugly. And being able to do that without having AA on at the entire canvas level gives Foundry as an application much better performance than it had before. So it's overall a really nice win. If you are a module developer creating graphics instances, and by that I mean very specifically like Pixie graphics instances, you should know that the new default implementation of Pixie graphics has been replaced with this smooth graphics backend. So when you create like a new Pixie graphics, what you're getting is a smooth graphics instance. There are cases in which you may not want that, where you may actually want the legacy graphics because it is slightly faster, and if you just need to draw like a rectangle or a mask, there are other cases where using a legacy graphics is better. So you can access that in the API as pixie.legacygraphics rather than pixie.graphics. Important technical note. I already spoke about canvas performance modes. That was an important one that we added. The FPS monitor at the bottom, I did comment on that. I saw someone asking in chat about that. That is a setting under configure settings. There's a setting for show FPS meter or not. You can disable the display of the FPS meter, or enable it if you want. All right. Here's another important note. So we changed the logic used for map note pinning. So suppose I pin a location to the map here. Let me give it like let's give it a big skull icon. So suppose there's a location that I've pinned to the map here, and the player has permission to this journal entry, so they could see the pin. The location of the pin is now conditionally filtered the visibility of the pin is now conditionally filtered based on your polygon visibility. So when I have no token selected as the GM, I can see this, but if I have a token selected, from the token's perspective, those map note locations now require you to have direct line of sight to them in order to have them appear on the map. So as I move around the side of this tent, I will be able to see the pin, but only if I have direct line of sight to the location where the pin has been placed. All right, scrolling status text. That's a fun one. We added a system in the core software that supports adding scrolling status text for things like when I add a status condition or I remove a status effect. These little sort of scrolling pop-ups are an optional feature that can be disabled. That, it doesn't have to only be used for status text. But by default, it is used if you have an active effect. So suppose in the 5e system here, I'll give this druid like the shield spell. I know that's not class appropriate, but bear with me. If I toggle the shield active effect on or something, like basically the toggling of that active effect will provide a scrolling status text notification. It also, in the 5e system, and any system can implement this, but it is up to each individual system to implement it. We have damage text. So like if you take damage or gain healing, there is scrolling notifications that can occur as a result of that damage or healing. It's up to the caller of the API. That font size can be anything you want. The font, the color, the placement. So the scrolling damage numbers, excuse me, can be handled there, and it works for say like group damage. So like if there's a 1d6, that's 6 damage that affects all of these individuals. When I apply damage to the whole group, everyone, all of these commoners that just keel over and die, all of these damage or healing numbers are applied to, are depicted for all of the different characters that are affected. The size of the text that scrolls is dependent on the significance of the amount relative to the entire health bar. So like that's like a very big hit or a very big heal versus like a very small hit or a very small heal. Again, this is up to the system or the API developer to choose like how they want that to look.
And I'm correct in saying that this is also based on permissions of visibility for the token.
Yes, that's right. I think so. I may have to look into that. It's certainly based on visibility of the token, but it may not be based on visibility of the health bar. That's something we might choose to investigate, but I think let me check real quick.
I vaguely recall we tested it when you first showcased the feature internally, and My head is saying that it was based on whether or not the health bar was visible, but I'm not 100% either.
Does Akron not belong to... Oops, nope. Let me give permission for one of these tokens. Yeah, so from a player perspective, if... sorry, I'm going to just put this over your face for a second, Nath. If I do damage to another... Oh, wow, that's very loud. Hang on. Sorry about that. I need to mute one of my tabs so I don't blow our eardrums out. Yeah, so on this side, on the left, from the player perspective, if I damage or heal a token, they are going to see that even if they don't see the health bar, but they'll see the damage application. Again, it is a little bit up to the API developer to choose. But like if a token were hidden, for example, and they sustain damage, there isn't like scrolling combat text that reveals the location of a hidden token. So that may be something that we either choose to tweak in the core software or something that we choose to tweak in the 5e implementation of the system that's dispatching these damage text numbers to choose more intelligently whether we should, you know, trigger them or not. But I do think that like oftentimes it's not a crazy default. Like if you're running a combat encounter and, you know, this creature takes some damage, it's not crazy to indicate to players that creature took some damage, even if they don't know what the size of the total health bar is. But yeah, that's something that we'll continue to iterate on. Yeah. Let's see here. Did it do... And another thing is, like, yeah, where it says, like, minus 1,000... you could have that display the true amount that was actually sustained rather than the amount that was attempted. Like, so it's up to you as an API developer whether you want to show like what actually happened or show the initial like amount that was attempted, like whether, you know, whether that gives away that the creature's dead or not. So yeah, I mean, there's lots of flexibility and it's really left up to module and system developers to choose what they want to do with that system. Fog of War is now saved in a more efficient format. It's I know this sounds like very 1990s to say, but we save Fog of War now as JPEG. People are going to say like, why not WebP? You love WebP. We do love WebP. WebP is the smallest file sizes, but WebP is slower to compress to get into WebP format. So JPEG is a nice balance between it's like a small file size for storing Fog of War versus a fast compression to get it down to that smaller file size. So yeah, so you don't have to do anything. Your existing Fog of War will continue to work. It's just going to, next time Fog of War is saved after you move to V9, it will get saved as a JPEG instead of as a PNG as it was previously. So that's another thing that's a little bit nice for performance in reducing disk size of your Fog of War exploration. We have new supported file format, AVIF, for animated video files. All right, interface features. We have so much to talk about. I can't believe, like, hopefully people are still with us. We've just got, like, miles and miles of features that are new in V9. We've got new sheet layouts for the light configuration sheet as well as for the scene configuration sheet. I think I've shown you both of these earlier on the stream, but both scene and light configuration are now a tabbed layout with different tabs for different key sections. We have a new emphasis on CSS variables, which allows us to do core styling throughout the software using consistent variable rules. In one place that this shows up very obviously is in the settings menu. I can say, change my font size for the application, which would make all fonts everywhere larger or smaller. That's probably unusably small there, but yeah, you can change the font size of the app relative to other aspects of the interface, and this is all done through CSS variables, which module and system developers can now also use. Let's talk about the support details button. On the settings page, we added a new support button, which when popped out when clicked, will have some suggestions for where to get help if you need help. It will also display to you a report which can be automatically like copy pasted to your clipboard of like how much stuff do you have in your world, how much stuff do you have on your scene that you're currently rendering. And that can really help us as a support staff to get you the solution to any problem that you might have. It tells us like what version you're using, what system you're using, how many active modules you have, what performance mode you're running on, what GPU and GPU renderer you're using, what your max texture size is, how much stuff you have in your current scene, how big that scene is, how much stuff you have in your world. This is a place we can add additional information in the future as well if there's other diagnostics that we run into in the future that end up being really important to help us debug. So as more people start using V9, those of you in our Discord server who either help to solve problems that others have or run into problems yourself, we'll start asking people to, paste your support details into Discord as a way for us to help you. So,
and credit where it's due, the community helpers and moderators from the Discord are largely responsible for this coming to fruition. One of them took the time to take what began as a community support macro to do this, turned it into a module, and then through interacting with us and particularly Cody, we got this rolled into the core software as something that just makes it a lot easier to troubleshoot issues that anyone might be having.
Yeah, that's right. Let's see. Improved invitation links. So this is a fun one. I can show you this. The invitation links UI will now do two things that it did not previously do. The first thing that it did not previously do is it will hide your internet-facing invitation link. So like I'm here now on stream and I'll pull up my invitation link and I want to give my players my invitation link, but I don't necessarily want to give the hundreds of people who are watching this stream my invitation link. So that's now hidden by default. I can still like click in it and it will still copy to my clipboard. So I can copy the true underlying link so that I can like paste it to someone without it actually revealing that invitation link to anyone who might be like watching. The other thing that we added is an automatic port check tool. So when your Foundry server starts, we bounce back off of a relay service that we maintain. We don't do anything with that data aside from confirming whether your Foundry instance is accessible. And so what that lets us do is it lets us show a little check mark to you that confirms like, yes, your Foundry instance is actually available for people to connect to, or no, your Foundry instance is not available for people to connect to. And that will help you to understand, is the problem with my networking configuration? Like, do I need to set up port forwarding, or, is there a firewall or something that's blocking access to Foundry, or is that all configured correctly and any sort of connectivity issue that your player has is something else on their end? So this tool basically helps confirm for you, is it my problem or is it my player's problem? And I think that's going to help us a lot in terms of like resolving people's difficulties that they have with getting players connected to their self-hosted Foundry instance. All right, moving on. Dice. There's not too much dice stuff in this update, but there are two things I wanted to mention. The first is, as you might know, if you like /roll or /r, that roll is going to be based on your default roll mode that you have configured. Oh, I need my pretty dice. I can't live without my pretty dice. Yeah, so /r, I have this set to blind GM roll. The result of my /r is a blind GM roll. we did add an explicit way to override that. Like if I say GM roll 3d4 and my default selector is for blind GM roll, I did get a regular GM roll. So we added a /public roll, or PR, which when you roll it that way, it's always public regardless of what drop-down option you have. So like the drop-down is the default for a regular roll, but now you can explicitly public roll to override that drop-down if you want to explicitly do that in chat. The other thing I really need to mention about dice is that V9 was one of the key steps in the multi-step deprecation of, well, not deprecation, the multi-step transition from synchronous to asynchronous rolls. So for the module developers out there, what that means is that roll evaluation is now async by default. So when you evaluate a dice roll, it is going to be an asynchronous function that will return a promise by default, unless you opt into the backwards compatible flag of passing async false when you call the evaluate method. So if you need more time to migrate your code from synchronous rolls to asynchronous rolls, you can have more time. You can have until V10 to do that, but you do need to start passing async false to that API. Otherwise, if you are ready to start consuming asynchronous dice rolls, go ahead and start working on that migration, because in V10 that's going to be required. I see a question from Weissrolf about what's the benefit of asynchronous rolls. It allows a lot of flexibility for other rolling mechanisms. So some examples would be, I want to have a module where whenever a dice roll is called for, I just present an input prompt where my players can roll their physical dice and then just type in what they got, and Foundry will do, will take it from there and do the rest of the math. Or I want to have a dice rolling module that integrates with Pixels dice, so that when I roll the Pixels dice, the results of that roll will automatically show up in the system. Or I want rolls that happen on a third-party site, like a D&D Beyond, to get pulled into Foundry and used inside Foundry VTT. So anything like that where there needs to be a sort of network call or some sort of asynchronous input in order for the dice roll to be resolved. This was like the main critical reason why we thought it was important to switch roll evaluation to be async by default. And so that was sort of as an architectural change that we've been in the process of going through. All right, audio stuff. We're getting there, but I still have a little bit more to go. Audio stuff. I hope you're sticking with me. I got some more features to show off. We introduced a new sound source, which is responsible for managing the placement of positional audio objects. That's more of an API thing behind the scenes, but what is less of a behind the scenes thing is that we have several new features for sounds. So the playlist UI has been improved a bit. It sort of is a little bit less jumpy in terms of like when songs start playing and how they show up in the currently playing dropdown. Another thing that has improved here is that you can now drag and drop sounds within a playlist to reorder it. So suppose I have a big playlist here of all this tabletop RPG music stuff that I created. It currently is auto-sorting based on alphabetical, but I could change this to be sorted manually for my playlist. And if I wanted to, because of the way that these numbers are, if I wanted to rearrange my playlist to sort the tracks in an order that I prefer, I can just drag and drop those tracks. This is a very long playlist, which makes it a little bit hard to do, but I guess we could maybe add an auto scroll at some point in there. But yeah, so I can like move all of my tracks around in this playlist and rearrange it as I see fit. And then that affects, of course, the things like what order the playlist plays in. If you're using like sequential playback, you can put the playlist into a predefined track order of your choosing.
We were really glad to be able to get this into V9 because it was a feature that got a lot of the community interest in V8, and we actually didn't manage to fit it in under the wire for
we didn't have time
production. So being able to kind of, I won't say sneak it in, but being able to go back and manage to grab it and pull it forward for V9 was,
Yeah, it wasn't so much of a sneak. Like, we knew we needed to do it, but we weren't. We were happy to have a little bit of extra time to follow up on some V8 stuff that we missed out on. So let's see, what else do we have for audio? You can now, in your journal entries, you can embed links to particular tracks inside a journal entry. And for a GM who has permission over it, you can click that track to, I believe, begin playing it? No? Oh, wait, no, okay, it doesn't, never mind. It does, all right, this is something that we need to maybe do another half step on. It does play it locally for you, but it doesn't, it like plays it not through the audio sidebar, because you could have sounds in here that aren't necessarily a playlist sound. But yeah, I think this is one that we probably need to do like another half step on, that if it is a playlist sound and you do this, it should actually play it like in the playlist. But yeah, anyways, the fact that we did add the ability to link sounds into a journal entry is, I think, a key thing that we'll be doing more with in the future.
Don't forget, you can also drop them to Canvas now to create a...
You spoiled it, but yes, I was going right there. Another drag and drop interaction that we have for sounds is you can use each track of a playlist as a quick way to create ambient audio. So suppose in my Michael Gelfi playlist, I'll look at like Campfire in Woods. I can drag my Campfire in Woods ambience and drop it on this campfire to quickly create a campfire sound that will then be a locational, positional audio rather than a playlist audio. So if you have a big library of, like, this lets you create playlists that maybe you don't ever really want to use them as a playlist, but you can use it as a library of environmental sounds that you want to use a lot when you're decorating your scenes. And you can use those playlists as sort of the source to quickly set up your scenes with different environmental audio sources. Yeah, very nice feature, that one. All right, we've got a couple of packaging improvements that are, I think, good to note. The first one has to do with our new versioning scheme. So if you're a package developer, modular system, when you are declaring your compatible core version or your required core version, you can now declare blanket requirement or blanket compatibility on a major Foundry version like 9. So V9 that is releasing now, if you want to say, my module is compatible with V9, you can just put 9 as your compatible core version, and you don't have to worry about which specific build version or subversion of 9 is relevant. It's just, this means my module is compatible with V9, it remains compatible with V9, and so this reduces the need for module developers to like make additional sort of trivial module releases just to declare compatibility where really everything is still working. So that's an important one. We added a new filter field for, let me go back to setup. On the setup menu, there's a new filter field for systems modules, so you can quickly, find that like Dice So Nice or Rollsmith Dice or whatever, like you can find the modules that you have music. I can find the music packs that I have currently installed with a filter. Another thing that we did is when you are deleting a world, I don't want to actually delete a world, but I'll start the process. When I click to delete a world, we have a sort of a random confirmation code that you have to enter now to delete the world. This was to create more consistency where some worlds were like very hard to delete because what you had to do previously was enter their exact title. And so if your world name was like long or had like special characters in it, it was like very difficult to enter the exact title of your world in the confirmation box. So now it's just sort of 4 random characters that you have to enter to confirm, rather than, and that makes it, easier to delete. We also made it a little easier to create worlds. So when I create a world, as I am entering in, my fancy world title, it will automatically slugify a valid world ID, like a world name for you. There are some specific requirements of the data path field, like it should be lowercase, it should use hyphens, no special characters, because it needs to end up being a web compatible folder name. So as you're typing in, some just mix of sort of crazy characters, it will create a web friendly world name. You can change this yourself. I can do like my custom path. You can override the default, but it will auto-generate a default for you that's valid. So that's helpful. So that's that. While I'm still here on the setup page, I will mention that another key architectural infrastructural change that we made is that V9 is now using Electron 14, which bundles Chromium 93. So users who install a fresh version of V9 will be getting Electron 14, including some of the improvements that it brings with it. All right, I'm almost done with the key features I wanted to comment on. A couple more. One is that for API developers, for module and system devs, entity deprecation has happened this version. You recall that V8 was all about documents, and as we switched to documents instead of entities, we left a bunch of backwards compatible pathways where you could keep using entities and entity-related functions. Those are now all gone. So if you didn't update your module during V8 to get rid of your reliance on entity-related concepts, you will now have to do that because documents are the way forward. One other one that I really like is that we improved performance a lot of the S3 file picker. So when I'm looking for files in S3, it is way, way faster now. We improved the precise way that we were targeting different S3 data paths, and that's allowed for us to allow you to traverse the S3 file browser much faster with less latency than you had before. So that's something that for those of you who keep a lot of data in S3, you're going to really notice that change and that improvement. Another API related thing is that we froze the const object. This was intended to be frozen all along, and we kind of missed the fact that it wasn't. But const, anything inside const is a declaration that is used by both the client side and the server side. It's not possible to change it meaningfully on the client side because that would cause the server to be out of sync. So we freeze that const object now to prevent people from poking their fingers into it. I know that's caused a little bit of friction for some of you, but we hope you all have a workaround for that, that you're on track to deploy. But it was an important change that we had to make. We also have a bit of new user experience prompting on the setup page and in a new world when you create a world for the first time. I won't show it because I have just stuff already, so I'd have to delete everything to show it. But when you first installed Foundry and it's fresh and you have nothing, we sort of funnel you towards installing a system with a more elegant, new user onboarding workflow. So when the user first installs Foundry, they've got nothing. We will direct them to install a system first, and then to create a world using that system. And it kind of helps to make users feel a little bit less lost the first time they launch the software. And it's like, well, what do I do now? And then also the first time you launch a world, when you create your first world, there are some chat messages that will auto-populate in the chat log that give you some advice about how to get started. So that's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of like a very large amount of new user experience focused things that we're going to be doing over the next couple releases. All right, I've got one last thing to mention, which is for Mac OS. We added a context menu to the dock, which brings parity with the Windows context menu, where if you use the context menu on your Mac OS dock. It has some quick navigation links to help you to quickly get to your user data folder location. So you can easily, as a Mac user, find where your user data is stored. All right, I'm tired of talking. We did a lot. Just let me close by saying we did a lot in V9 outside of what I've even covered here. These 7 sets of update notes go in elaborate detail into exactly all of the things that we did. So you'd have to read the release notes in order to really understand everything. But I hope this has been a really informative survey of everything that's coming in V9.
Something like 600, 800 issues did we tackle during those?
Yeah, I mean, if we look at the milestones for the last couple, so like V9 Prototype 1, 68, V9 Prototype 2, 121, V9 Dev 1, 82, 68, 43, 41, 54. Yeah, it's getting up close to like 600 issues that were included in all of V9. So it's really, really, really something.
Yeah, it's... For those of you who are looking for like a textual summary of this, I'm planning to try and put one together for V9 stable on Monday. Maybe Tuesday, we'll see. Probably Monday. It'll depend entirely on how significant an amount of caffeine I need to intake on Monday morning to manage to process like 600 or 800 issues worth of GitLab into a nice, condensed, easy-to-read summary of everything we've changed.
Yeah, but I think we will have some sort of overview summary as part of our final V9 release. So, all right, with that, I do want to take a quick break, and then when we come back from the break, I'm going to do a little giveaway, and I'll do questions and answers from the community. I'm surprised it's already 6:30 here. I was thinking this was when we'd sort of wrap up all together, but there was just so much to go over. So let's take like 2 or 3 minutes. I'm going to take a short break, and then when I come back, I'll pull together a roll table to toss out some license keys to the community, but then we'll do a bit of Q&A where you all can ask us questions. We'll take those and answer for at least 30 minutes. We'll see. So please do stick around, save up your questions, and we'll see you just after the break. And welcome back. Oh no, echo. Sorry. My bad. Got me. Twitch got me.
We are professionals.
We do good. Welcome back. Oh, we got some really intense music going on. I love it, but it's a little scary. All right, so we're going to do a giveaway. For those of you who are with us in chat, I'm going to roll a couple of giveaway keys for Foundry Virtual Tabletop. I will also be giving you a copy of the Demon Queen Awakens, which is our original adventure for Foundry VTT. It's a really fun 4-shot mini adventure for a level 9 party that we think is a lot of fun. We've gotten some really great playtesting feedback from folks who have playtested Demon Queen, and we will be releasing the full version of Demon Queen Awakens in the coming month. We'll see. But yeah, it's a lot of fun, Demon Queen Awakens, and I'll throw in some of those for you as well. So get your good luck charm going. I'm gonna roll on the rollable table of Doom/Glory, and good luck to you all. Our first winner is... Oh, we're going far on this one. We're going all the way to Roll for Combat. Oh, one of our amazing content creators in the community. Roll for Combat, everyone. Give them a hand for Battle Zoo Bestiary. I promise we didn't rig this giveaway. But you never know. I mean, our content creators are people too. They're allowed to win things. Although I do feel a little bit bad giving like a 5e adventure to a Pathfinder 2 creator.
Yeah, it's kind of like a kind of a hey, don't you regret your life choices?
No. Congratulations to Roll for Combat. I don't know if you're here. If you are, please say something in chat if you'd like to accept this prize, which you can, of course, give away yourself as a re-gift if you want, or otherwise I will re-roll. But, oh yeah, that's true. Battle Zoo Bestiary is coming out for 5e also. All right, in the meantime, while we wait to see if there's a confirmation from Roll for Combat, I'm going to re-roll another winner. Away we go. Evo Unnamed, number 79. You, Evo Unnamed, are a winner if you are interested in a Foundry VTT license key and a copy of the Demon Queen Awakened adventure. Give us a shout in chat and let us know if you accept. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and pull a third winner so we can get a couple irons in the fire, and let's see if we get any acceptances. Drum roll. Havoc Live Killer, number 107. Havoc Live Killer. If you are here, you also are a winner. Yes, Evo Unnamed, congratulations. And so as Nath has just mentioned to you, all you'll need to do is step 1. Make sure you have an account on the foundryvtt.com website. If you already have one, that's great. If you need to register one, go ahead and do that. Step 2, send us a DM on Twitch and remind us that you were a winner, and I will get that license and that Demon Queen Awakens issued to your account. Let's see if we get anything back from Havoc Killer or if we heard anything from Roll for Combat.
I have seen nothing from Roll for Combat.
I think they missed it. Either that or they're too shy to accept after the premium content promotion. All right, Roll for Combat, I'm afraid, has missed the boat. But still, check out Battle Zoo Bestiary. It's a very cool piece of premium content that is well worth your purchase. All right, so I'm gonna roll again. Levifar, number 146, Levifar. If you are here and interested in your spectacular prize, please confirm for us in chat. I think we're almost out of time for Havoc Killer. We'll see.
Got an accept from Levifar.
Hey, congratulations, Levifar. Same instructions. Just make sure you have an account on the Foundry VTT website. Send us a DM on Twitch, and we will get that winning prizes to you. All right, I think time has run out for Havoc Killer, so I'm going to go ahead and roll again. Jensen Vars, one of our lovely community developers, Jensen Vars. If you are interested in an additional copy of Foundry VTT and or the Demon Queen Awakens adventure, you are the winner. Let's see what we get. Let's see what we get. Oh, they stepped away just at the wrong time. Just at the wrong time. Too busy building a release or doing some CI/CD changes. I don't know. What's he doing?
Knowing Jansen, it's probably fighting with CSS.
Okay. All right. We're rolling again. Here we go. Away. We will find a third winner. Caxips06. Caxips. KAXIPS06. If you are here, you are a winner. They both had entities and had to quickly convert to documents. Yes, I think that's the best answer. Love it.
Poor Kenny, one entry away.
Oh, man. We're gonna have to, like, start going to people who are just one off. All right, should I re-roll? Should I roll again, or should we just have mercy on Kenny SP33?
Let's have mercy on Kenny. Kenny's in chat, active.
All right, Kenny, you are the winner. Kenny SP33 by right of proximity, off by one error. It's a big thing in programming. Kenny, congratulations. You are the winner by proxy. Shoot us a message. I'm going to put your name in chat so I remember that you are the winner. All right, we got our winners for today. Good job, everyone. Congratulations on your winning. We will have more streams with more giveaways coming in the near future, so please do tune in with the hope of future prizes yet to come. And now we will move into the Q&A section of our stream, so any questions that you have for us, ideally about V9, but, you know, whatever your questions may be, we'll try and answer them. Do us a favor and prefix your question with like an all caps question so that it's easy for us to pick out of the chat log, and we'll just kind of go through those and see what we get. So fire away, folks. Let us know what we can answer for you. First question. You go ahead. Go ahead.
Is there a way for the GM to set key bindings for the players? I assume you mean on behalf of the players, in which case the answer is a very flat no.
I like the yes nod with the no answer. It's not possible. We decided the keybinds are best as a client setting, and so it is per client, which means per device. So you might even have like a different set of key bindings on, say, your laptop as on your desktop as on your wherever else you use Foundry. Unfortunately, it's not possible to set those on behalf of your players, but we do hope that we've made it very easy for your players to set them themselves.
Next up, it's scrolling so fast. Right, so what's your personal favorite new thing in V9?
You go first, I gotta think.
The fact that we're getting it released before January.
That's such like a product manager answer. Come on, man. Have some soul.
Alright, the real answer, I don't know, it's a hard competition for me, despite the fact, like, everyone's going to assume that my answer is going to be cards, because, you know...
I assumed it would be, yeah.
But, honestly, I had card support before, so it's kind of, like, it's great that I can do it using the actual API instead of my hacked-together kind of garbage methods. So I think my lowball answer is going to be drag and drop support for audio. That's
nice.
That's the thing that I think I'm happiest about managing to get into V9.
Nice. Probably for me, polygons. I don't know. We worked really hard on the lighting system and the algorithms underneath it to create this effect, and so I plan to just kind of kick my feet up and really enjoy it, and just, to be honest, I have been, because I've been running games in V9 for quite some time now, but continue just really enjoying just really enjoying the lighting and what it's going to allow us to do, as I alluded to earlier, with vision modes and other enhancements to the aesthetic presentation of Foundry VTT.
I will say that I love the lighting engine, but I think everyone's going to love the lighting engine. The lighting changes are fantastic, and I think the default answer that anyone would give for what's coming in V9 that they're most excited about is going to be lighting changes. I love them myself. I think it's going to be great for content creators and for us folk who help light and wall maps. But
yeah. Question from Gaming Post: does having many music tracks and playlists impact performance like having many actors and scenes does? Not too bad, because each track, each playlist is really pretty small data. It has much less data in it than, say, a scene or an actor does. Like, if you think of like how much data is in a playlist track, well, it's a title, it's a path, it's a volume, does it repeat or not, does it fade or not, maybe it has a description. Ultimately, it's pretty small data, and so having a lot of them, it's not really a big performance concern. Now, it is ideal not to have like a ton of anything, but I think compared to, say, scenes and actors, or even items, having lots of audio is not really much of a performance issue.
Yeah, meanwhile, comparatively, like, a single actor for... a single feature, like a monster feature for 5e, has something like... I want to say close to 100 disparate pieces of JSON data to manage. Like,
yeah, I mean, like, this entire... This 68 track playlist is much smaller than like a single actor or a single item. So it's something that you don't need to worry about too much on the audio side. Now, if you have them all playing at once, you're going to be in some real trouble. But as long as they're not playing, it scales quite easily. A question from CNC. You showed alphabetically sorted earlier, but it was sorting by hex numbers, i.e. like 1 before 10, 11, then 2. So we could investigate a more sort of humanized sorting that checks to see if the initial characters of the string are numeric, and if the initial characters of the string are numeric, we could do like a numeric sort for the first bit and then alphabetical sort to break ties. That is a sorting function that we could write and could add. It's not something we currently have prioritized. You say, will we be looking into fixing this? It's not really a bug per se. Like, we are using the standard JavaScript locale compare for strings. It's just could be nicer.
I'll also point out that that's pretty much how sorting works in most operating systems as well. So
it's a thing that can be improved upon, but it's not something we necessarily like. There's going to be a whole V10 coming up with 600 new features for us to do. So will this be one of them? Maybe. It's not something we're going to try and address before releasing V9, though.
You did like 98% of the cards implementation for Foundry. What was the biggest difficulty implementing cards?
Trying to figure out how much nuance and sophistication to put into the data model. So an example was like, we could try and make the data model simpler in some ways and more rich in some ways, and figuring out how rich the data model should be took a lot of conversation with community developers, a lot of feedback internally, a lot of iterating back and forth. Like, an example of this is that we ended up with an implementation where cards can have more than one face, which, if you think about like a physical playing card, you've got like the back and you've got the front. And, we support a card back and configuration of the card back. We support the card front and configuration of the card front. But we also support more than one face. So like this ace of clubs could have like primary face and secondary face. And like, why did we do that? Why would we add support for more than one face of the card? Well, we were thinking a lot about what certain card games do, and some card games have different mechanics for the card depending on, say, the orientation, like whether it's tapped or not tapped, or, you know, some cards, you know, have like a two-part face where you can choose, like, it's either this one or this one. And since card games are trying to pack more sort of mechanical flexibility into a fundamentally two-dimensional object, we don't necessarily have to be restricted to the physical two-dimensionality. And so adding like support for multiple faces per card is something that I was initially reluctant to do that, but we had some good conversations with the community, and that's something we ended up deciding to do. And just, you know, naming, like getting the data structure right, like that took a lot of careful thought.
Just because it's at the bottom of the chat, but it's something that I have an immediate answer for. Aqua590 asks if there's official documentation for cards yet. Not public, but yes, it's written and it will be available.
I need to push the latest API docs, but there is so Foundry VTT /API /alpha has our in development API docs, which does contain documentation for cards. It is not the absolute latest version. I need to push an update to the alpha API docs, but that will be, once V9 releases, that will be the regular like /API documentation.
In addition, we'll have a knowledge base article ready on Monday.
Okay, yeah, that's good to know. But yeah, you know, we have some documentation in the cards API for various sort of methods that it has, like dealing cards, for example, like the deal method. How do you deal cards from one deck to another? So yeah, all of that will be available.
Scrolling down a bit. Have the hardware resources required changed for V9? No, but it will very likely be more performant overall.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that the requirements have changed. The requirements have not changed, but how those requirements map to the actual performance that you get out of the software is a little bit different.
What else have we got here? Will GMs be able to import their own card faces and backs? Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. I will say there's not like a easy add this folder of card images to create a card deck or anything like that. You will have to go through the workflow of changing individual cards or creating new cards.
Yeah. Deck creation is probably a little bit of work at the moment, and I think that's something that in the future we can try and add tools to speed up the process of creating a new deck from scratch. At the moment, you know, if you start with a completely empty deck, you will have to kind of go through and one at a time, you know, this is going to be the Queen of Cups. And, you know, you have to add that and then add the image for the Queen of Cups and kind of set up your cards one at a time. It could take you an hour to set up a deck. After you've set it up, you can add it to a compendium pack, you can save it to JSON, you can back it up, you can share it with your friends. So, you know, it is kind of like one-time work that has to be done, and there may be ways in the future to speed that up by adding, like we added support with playlists where you can take an entire folder of audio and quickly create a playlist from each of those audio files. We could probably add a similar feature to like quickly create a deck from a folder full of like card face images, but that's not part of V9 at the moment.
Again, it's at the bottom of the chat, but it's card related. Weiss Rolf, yes, asks, can decks be more quickly edited by editing some file in a text editor? The clearest answer I can give is not really. It's
Kind of.
It's always going to be data entry. There are some methods that you can use that might be more time efficient. I'm contemplating.
Go ahead.
I'm contemplating whether or not I want to share my own personal method for deck creation with the community, because it is still a convoluted process, but it is somewhat more direct and efficient for handling.
So, like, for example, oops, that was the giveaway list. Here's the here's like the deck in a text editor. Like, there is a data structure here, but is this going to be a good experience for you to go through and edit it this way? Probably not. If you had the deck in a structured format, though, you could import that file, and you could easily use our API to automate creating a deck from it. So, as long as you put the data in some data structure that you can parse, you can write a macro, you can write a tiny little script that would load that file and convert it into a Foundry deck. Guess it's my turn to pick a question, huh? Question from...
Sorry, I was just responding in chat, but yes, go ahead.
Question from Aviel. Any plans on manipulating the background image on a scene, like rotating or inverting maps? Yeah, I think this is something we should do. I mean, we haven't prioritized this, and it's now version 9 and we still haven't prioritized it. But if you have a map like this, you should be able to rotate it or flip it, and it kind of becomes a slightly different experience for how your players encounter it or experience it. By just flipping the map can make it feel like it's a bit of a different area for like a wilderness encounter or something. So we should have an ability to rotate or flip the background image to create sort of a slightly different scene. I expect that that's something that we might get to in V10, maybe. I mean, it certainly should be on the list of ideas to consider. It's not a huge feature.
Is the Lightspeed module still needed or beneficial with advances in V9? I think the dev... You may correct me on this, I'm not 100%. I believe the dev is currently reviewing whether or not they want to continue supporting it. It would require some pretty significant overhauls, I think, to adapt to the V9 lighting engine for it.
Yeah, I certainly would... I would not recommend that anyone use a lighting or vision module at first when they update to V9. I would encourage everyone to see how the core software works for you, see how the new features work, see what is compatible with the way that you want the software to work and what is not compatible with the way you want the software to work, and then make an informed decision about whether to enable or re-enable a module in that area. I mean, we've put a tremendous amount of effort into making changes to this particular area of the software. I would encourage you to try it and then make a choice. Certainly it shouldn't be viewed as required under any circumstances, but try it, try the core lighting first, and then make a choice if you want to augment that with any modules.
The Drewboat asks, how many modules does the creator of Foundry VTT run?
Usually maybe 4 or 5.
I too am in the module light camp these days. I think I'm sitting at
excluding content packs, because I think those are kind of a different situation where maybe I'll have a number of those. But in terms of modules that really alter the functionality of the software, yeah, probably usually around 4 or 5.
There's a very technical question about compendium indexing from Weiss Rolf. Does the new compendium indexing result in lower Node.js load on the world server when the world is entered? I actually think it's more load initially.
It is a so it's less peak load because we phase the process of preparing those compendium indexes so that they don't burst to like really high sort of bursty memory utilization. So the peak load is lower. There is work that's done on the server side when it's booting up and first launching a world, but it's now sort of more consistent in terms of its utilization profile, so it's less spiky.
Can key bindings be imported, exported? Not at this time, maybe in the future.
Not yet. We discussed this as something we'd like to do. Key bindings came really late in the V9 dev cycle, and I'm thrilled that we got it in, but I think there are some follow-ups on key bindings that would be great to add, and I think being able to export your keybind configuration so that you can set up the same key bindings on a different device is something that we absolutely should do. I wouldn't be surprised if a module beats us to this, like there are modules that help automate your, what active modules you want to have configured or something like that. Because modules can access that setting of what the key bindings are, and modules can also write to that setting of what the key bindings should be. So not to say that we're trying to shift responsibility on this to the developer community, but we didn't have time to do this. It is something that I think we'll do, but I wouldn't be surprised if a module handles save, import, export of your key binding settings before we get to it in V10.
And on that note, MD Suitor asks, what issues have we come across when we implement features that already exist in a module? I don't know if we have.
Well, I think there are some considerations, certainly. We have conversations about what is it going to mean that this feature enters into core when it's previously been module territory. That's a conversation that we tend to have. That conversation often involves the module author so that they know that we're considering doing a thing. What challenges or what problems do we have? Ultimately, we're making decisions for what's needed for the core software, what's the right thing for the core software, and so avoiding any sort of module collision isn't really something that we prioritize. If there's a thing that needs to be core because we believe it needs to be core, we're gonna do it.
I'm going to rapid fire a couple really quick because they're quick questions. Staffzor asks if there's going to be a new D&D 5e system update that uses the new APIs introduced in V9. Yes, it already exists. You're using it right now and just don't know it. What are the big goals for Foundry VTT? Are there any big architectural changes in mind? We have a GitLab where you can view our currently scoped plans. We're going to stop working on it when we're satisfied that it's big and feature complete in every possible way and we can't think of anything else to do with it, right, boss?
Yeah, that's right. I think one thing that I would expand upon that about is on one of the things that GitLab doesn't do a great job of necessarily is letting people know what are our big ideas. It is a bit more tactical about what are we actually doing. There is an epics milestone on GitLab though where we kind of tag big ideas that we would like to have. So for example, Mac code signing, Active Effects Phase 2, redesign the first time setup experience, some of the functionality that token attacher or prefabs have for linking things together, basic documents, application v2, accessibility improvements, redesigning the journal system, all these sort of big things that we would like to do in the long term. A lot of them are tagged as epic, and they're put in this sort of epics milestone. So these are things that we would only ever tackle like 1 to 3 of these per major update. So like there's years worth of potential work to do here, and these are just because it's on the list, it is not a guarantee that we'll ever do it. But in terms of like what are the big things, those are the big things.
Claymore Studios asks, will we ever produce walkthroughs, tutorial videos to help GMs add their content like subclasses, get used to the software and more? We do have some ideas internally. I'd like to say yes. I'm not sure when. Time is, of course, our least available resource.
Yeah, I mean, I think a big focus for us is new user experience, and that comes in many forms, and people are different type, they learn in different ways. So like we're working a lot on documentation now, we're working on adding tool tipping and guided UX within the software itself to sort of help new users understand how to get started. I think video tutorials, video guides is definitely something that our team is enthusiastic about and pretty passionate about, and Matt obviously has a huge and talented background in doing that, and that's something that he would like to do more of in an official capacity. So I do think that this is something that you'll see more of. I mean, I think it's sort of a slow and steady thing though, because like we've just redone the lighting system, so this would be a great time to do a sort of tutorial video on how to do lighting in Foundry. But we don't want to do a tutorial video on, say, this is how to write journal entries in Foundry, because redesigning the journal system is something that we might consider doing in V10 or V11. And so, you know, we have to be thoughtful about when's the right time to invest in creating those sorts of tutorials versus versus delaying them for when the software is more stable and more able to be documented in that regard.
Skipping over a few here. Still skipping. Someone asks if we're going to implement pickup sticks functionality in V10, where you can place items on the canvas. We have not at this time scoped what we're going to do with V10.
Yeah, we won't confirm anything yay or nay for V10 at this point, but I would coach a little bit in the way that we answer this question, that like when we have these sorts of conversations, and to be fair, I'm probably like putting words in the asker's mouth here, but we don't talk about it as like, should we do pickup sticks? We talk about it as, we've got item documents, we've got the canvas, do we want a way for people to place items on the canvas? And how pickup sticks happens to be doing that is almost immaterial to us. Now, if we decide to prioritize it, if we decide to do that, how an existing module handles something is certainly something that would be part of our thinking. But we have the ability, for example, to add new canvas object types. That's something that pickup sticks can't do. Pickup sticks has to make the best of what's available to them. So they have to approximate what type of object a placed item might be with, the other types of existing things that are on the canvas. So if we ever did it, we wouldn't be doing it exactly the same way. We would be doing it in a sort of more core way. And I'm probably whoever asked this question knows that, or didn't mean to imply that we would, but I do think that like when we talk about like, are we going to do a feature, we talk about, are we going to enable items being placeable on the canvas? We don't talk about, are we going to do what this module does?
Potaman asks, I heard something about a documentation rework, possibly focused on the knowledge base. What is up with that? We are always improving the documentation. I've made comments in the docs feedback channel on our Discord that we are updating a lot of documents for V9. That's probably what you're referring to. But we are always looking for ways to make the knowledge base documentation more approachable, easier to read, ways to make it more comfortable for the new user who might pick it up. Mm-hmm. Do we have a list of all the functions deprecated between V8 and V9?
So deprecated methods are kind of excluded from our documentation because we don't want people to inadvertently trip into them and start using them because they saw it in the docs. What I would suggest is once you get the let me switch over to different view here. Like once you get V9 downloaded, if you pull open the main foundry.js file, we always annotate our deprecated methods with an @deprecated tag. So, I mean, this may not be a great solution for you, but as you can see, I've found 29 deprecated tag things. Each of them's like, say, deprecated since V9 to be removed in V10. Mouse wheel rate limit. If you were using mouse wheel rate limit, this affects you. The is down method of the keyboard handler. If you were using this affects you. So, you can kind of just next. You can kind of go through everywhere that we've tagged deprecated to see if it might be something that does impact you. Having a place that's like a centralized list of it would be nice, but I would encourage you in this case just to pull open the source code and just look for that @deprecated tag. That's probably the best option I can offer you at this point.
Juan Frank 11 asks regarding the new logging of card actions into chat. Is that something that's toggleable? I don't think we even have that in the API yet for devs to disable, do we?
Not yet. I created a ticket for stable if there's time to add API options for when like deal and pass and those methods are called in the API to be able to pass in like I don't know what it'd be called, like disable chat notification, or maybe it's like a notify true where true is the default, but you can pass false. I think that would be consistent with the way we do some other things. So yeah, we'll add an option for that in the API, and then in terms of whether we add a setting for it, maybe it's a good idea.
I think there's I think Rolltable uses toMessage false, which is probably just portable. Will there ever be a filter on the compendium? Well, compendiums, when you open them, do have a filter. Maybe the compendium tab?
Yeah, it could be that for someone who has like a very large number of compendium packs installed, finding one particular pack could have a filter. I suspect maybe a user might also want a way to search across like all of their compendium content all at once. That's something that would be nice to add in the future, especially now that they're all indexed.
Yeah, it might be a good UI improvement to try and standardize the compendium tab to look a little more like the rest in the future.
This is definitely something that we've discussed.
Yeah. Right. Next big goals we addressed. I think we may be getting to the bottom of the list of questions. Is there a combat turn marker planned somewhere on the roadmap? We have a combat.
We have no plans to build a combat turn marker. I'm just kidding. I mean, maybe there's a concept of what it means for a combat turn marker that is different. So this might be a user that hasn't gotten a chance to use Foundry much yet. So let me show what we've currently got, which is that all of these tokens, actors can be added, say, to a combat encounter. I'll just roll lots of dice. And so, the combat tracker can track exactly who's whose turn it is in combat as you're going through rounds, turns, etc. I think maybe what this is about like a turn marker, perhaps specifically, so that like when it's Aoth's turn, there's maybe like a visual indication on the canvas that like it is Aoth's turn now.
Right.
I'm guessing
there was a mod called Turn Marker that did that. It added a tile underneath the token whose turn it was.
Sure. Yeah. Sorry for us misunderstanding your question at first. We don't have plans for that, but I think it is a nice option to have. It's something that's well handled or could be well handled by a module, but it's also something that we might add in core, perhaps as a sort of combat tracker configuration setting of like whether to display an active turn marker or not. I like it. It's something that I would like probably if it existed. I think that's an example for me. And let me share this view into my mind without any judgment, because please don't feel any pressure by what I say here, because like my preferences are my preferences as a user and your preferences are your preferences. So everyone should feel like you should do whatever makes your game better. For me, something like a turn marker mod is something that like I'd like it, and if it were a core feature, I'd probably use it, but is it something I want enough that I'm going to go get a module to do it that I'll then keep that module activated and updated and potentially have a conflict with other combat tracker stuff that I do? And no, probably not. It probably is like not worth it to me to have a module for that. But if it were a core feature, I'd use it. And that's because I like a sort of lower profile of my Foundry environment. I like it sort of closer to core. I don't, that's my preference. But turn marker is a nice module, and I think if something like that is something important to you, you should definitely use it. I would like it to be core though at some point. I think that would be a nice feature to have.
Flow Radical asks us if there are any news or deliberations on implementation of folders. Well, he says compendium folders, but I'm pretty sure he means folders and compendiums. We're always talking about it. We think there's probably a future where we have some sort of implementation, but it's something that there's a lot of ways to do it wrong, and we want to do it right, so we need to give it the time necessary, and that means a lot of internal planning and discussion.
One thing that always affects our decision making is how important certain modules are in terms of empowering the way that the community develops. So one of the reasons we really prioritized key bindings for V9 is we observed the emergence of not one but two quite good keybind management libraries. And in many ways, the fact that there were two was actually a bigger problem for us than if there had been one, because if there had been one, then maybe there would have been standardization amongst module developers about this is the way we're handling keybinds, and maybe we might have coasted a little bit longer. But because that happened, we felt that keybinds had escalated to the point that it really was past the point where it was important for us to offer that in core as a way to handle this. And one thing that we see with compendium folders is that it's become a very important module for people who are creating content for Foundry. If you're creating adventure content for Foundry, they want their content in their compendium packs to be organized. And I can't blame them for that. I mean, obviously, better organization is good. What a lot of content developers maybe don't know is that there isn't a good underlying data structure for how to store folders inside compendium packs. And so a module-based solution does the best it can with the tools that it has available, but that solution is really limited by the fact that there's not the right underlying architecture to do that in a good way. And it's not the module's fault. It's our fault that we don't provide a better way to do it. The module's doing the best they can. But it's the kind of thing that as more and more content developers are reliant on this module because everyone wants their compendium content to be organized, it becomes more important for us to provide a core solution for that.
So this one's like a this next upcoming question is like a deep dive kind of question. Uh, the Red Mocha inquires what your background is and how you came to the decision to create Foundry and what gave you the confidence to take a project like this on.
It's a good question. Thank you for your curiosity. I appreciate you asking. Before I answer that, let me mention Carnaval Rolero. So I did an interesting interview with some folks in the Latin American community for Foundry VTT. Well, not just Foundry VTT, but sort of overall. They asked, to do an interview with me, and this was a little while ago when they were hosting this Carnival Rolero event. Let me see. Can I? Oh, I needed that to be like inside their channel. Anyways, maybe I can pull a link to this, but we did a video interview where we talked a lot about sort of this type of stuff. And so it might be that I can find a way to link that in Twitch chat in a moment, but it could be that you might be interested, you or anyone else. But I guess an answer to your question is that I didn't have a lot of confidence, especially not at first. I started working on Foundry VTT as a hobby project, just a side, nights and weekends thing. Because I thought it'd be interesting. I thought it'd be a fun challenge. There was some particular technologies, web technologies that I wanted to use to try and make like a virtual tabletop and to see how it would work. And, lo and behold, it ended up working really, really well. And that ended up creating what we have now and the team we have now and the business and everything. But it was very much like a one step at a time kind of thing. It wasn't like there was this grand plan of, okay, I'm going to leave my job. I'm going to make a virtual tabletop. We're going to launch in 2020, and then I'm going to grow the team. And like all of this has been kind of the business strategy and the way that the team has been growing and the way the software has been growing. I don't want to like freak people out by saying like there hasn't been a plan, because there's been a lot of planning, but the effective like strategic horizon of that planning has been relatively close. Like we're planning at kind of the 6 month to 1 year horizon, where other businesses would be planning at the 3 to 5 year horizon. Like we're not there. We're kind of taking it as it comes a little bit, and it has been a real ride because of that. I think there was a lot of soul searching involved in terms of like, did I want to double down on this and make it a real thing that I would sell to people, and like would I be prepared to deal with all of the responsibility of doing that? Like if I'm accepting people's money to provide them with something, that's a commitment that you're making. That's a big commitment that requires a lot of investment to do. And so yeah, it was sort of one step at a time, making sure that things were going according to plan, making sure that I thought that the software could scale, the team could scale, that I could scale, that I could delegate, that it would be possible to have this run just not strictly on my own like nights and weekends passion, but have it be maintainable as a business. That and a lot of the reasons why we have like the business model that we do is because of that. Because we're offering a one-time purchase license key, we can focus on continuing to make the software better. We can focus on doing the things that we think are most important for game masters and users, but we don't necessarily have to be just fighting to keep your subscription every month. We don't have to say, all right, well, what can we do to make our users happy in January so that they don't cancel their sub? And I think that has given us a lot of freedom, where we've been able to sort of focus on the big picture and to, do big things like what we've done in V9 while, doing it in a way that the size of the team we have and the people on the team, we're happy with the work, and we're not burning out, and we're not feeling like it's become overwhelming. I don't know, Nath, if you have anything to add to that. You see a lot of perspective on how things are going.
I honestly think that part of the reason the company has been so successful and has done so well is that drive that we aren't out there to compete with anybody. We aren't out there looking at other virtual tabletop softwares going, what are they doing that we can do better? We're just like, your focus has been from day one on making the best virtual tabletop you can make, and the money will just come because people will like it. Like, it's never been, I've never heard you say anything that has made me think that you're in this for like the financial drive. The financial drive's the byproduct, the software's the product.
Yeah, I mean, the business has to be successful enough that, you know, everyone's getting paid and happy to be doing this. But thankfully, things have gone really well for Foundry. And so I think we do have the luxury of being able to work in a space that's really fun to exist in, really fun to work in. And yeah, I mean, that's thanks to the community and the way that everyone has responded and helped to, you know, helped us to grow the Foundry community, helped us to share the word and, you know, bring other people in and continue growing our user base. But yeah, there's a lot of good stuff happening. It's been really, really a wonderful, wonderful year. And I'm so glad that we're getting V9 out before the end of the year in time for the holidays. And yeah, I really will look back on 2021 very fondly in terms of what we accomplished with Foundry. Obviously, it's been a very difficult year for a number of reasons outside of that. But I think, yeah, it's been really good, you know, for the software and for me and for us as a team. All right, let's take a couple more questions and then wrap up for the day.
I'll grab a few popcorn questions after the heaviness that one was.
Yeah.
So, Evil inquires if we have any plans on adding isometric grids, which is one of the first feature requests I think I submitted on GitLab when I was still just a user and not employed by the company. But plans, yes. It's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, I think as Grape Juice has shown, it's entirely possible to have isometric support in Foundry. But it's also a lot of work to have good isometric support. I think you need a lot of very thoughtful design and implementation in terms of how you're going to correctly layer objects so that for different isometric perspectives, the sort of stack of two-dimensional objects is correct to emulate a sort of pseudo 3D landscape. And that's tough. That's a lot of work. I'd love to do it someday, I think. But knowing how big a feature isometric support would be, I think it becomes a question of like, do we want to do isometric support, or would we like to do like 3 other really big features that would be really valuable to have? Because I think isometric is so big that it's probably about the size of like 3 major features.
No, it's really easy. All you have to do is turn the grid and skew it, like I wrote in my issue.
Here, I can. Yeah, go ahead.
That's all you have to do. Just the way I wrote it up. Just go and look at the article I linked to.
Did I do it? Is that? Wait, no.
Perfect. Yep.
Perfect. Done.
Yep. Just do it like that.
Done. It's done. Wait, I don't think that's the right perspective. That's really awful. Let's try. I don't know. Maybe.
This is awesome.
Okay, that's hurting my brain a little bit. We did it, guys. We did it. Someone get the doot doot trumpet. Yeah, I need the like crap harmonica Jurassic Park theme playing right now.
People are asking questions about lootable NPCs. As far as I know, lootable NPCs are a feature that is only available in some game systems implemented by those game systems, so it's not a core feature. I think it'll probably always be a system implemented feature. That's given that NPCs aren't something that Foundry itself has a concept of.
I was too distracted to hear the question, but I assume you answered it with aplomb.
Yeah, I totally handled that smoothly. No one's ever going to take issue with my answer to that question. It'll never come back to haunt me. Bunch of questions about turn marker works in V9. We've got a highlighted message from the Argos. I just want to say I've discovered Foundry VTT roughly a month ago to start a whole new Warhammer Fantasy campaign with friends. Best spent money of 2021.
Hey,
Foundry's really awesome.
Nice, thank
you. Huge kudos. We're always happy to hear from our community when
that's kind of feedback that gives us some really immense energy. We love hearing that.
That's going to get me through Monday.
All right. Last question?
I'm rapidly searching.
There's one that Cody would like this question. Is there any official Foundry merch planned?
Yeah, Cody would like this question. No, we don't have internal discussions about merch at all. I don't know what would give you that idea. Yeah, Cody is commonly helping to push forward the ball of Foundry merchandise. We do indeed want to move into producing some merchandise that can be bought to show off, that you like us, etc. We want to make sure that what we're producing is of a good enough quality that no one feels like we just slapped the company logo on a t-shirt and said, here you go.
Yeah. Florian asks if we'll see the Atropos man bun again. I don't know. I'm not sure. That was kind of a 2020 COVID thing. Well, I guess definitely a lot of 2021 as well. But
I've also got one from Turboatron, I think.
Nice.
Turbo Ratin. Anyway, about whether or not I'm getting a haircut with the V10 release. I get a haircut about every 3 weeks, just the sides.
That's funny. Turbo Raton. Yeah. All right. Well, I think we've kind of reached saturation point. Nath, good job.
I think so. I think we have answered every question we can answer. I will make mention, we haven't announced it yet, but there is going to be an upcoming live stream with the entire Foundry team.
Yeah.
We're going to get the staff together for a year-end kind of review, look back, and answer community questions as a whole. So you'll get more opportunities to question us in the future.
Cool. All right. Anything else?
No, do you want to show people the sneaky stuff that you've been working on?
No.
Okay.
I have nothing to show.
Yeah, there's definitely nothing on the screen right now that anyone
No.
can see that
It's not anything
might be
really
in development.
No, it's not. I mean, it's only like slightly in development, but yeah, we're working on. Oh, nice. That was a good one. That's a good place to end. Yeah, cool. So good stream. Shall we?
Good stream, everybody.
Shall we roll out to some kind of, I don't know, exit fanfare? No.
How can we raid? I don't even see anyone on my list for worth raiding. Ooh. Do.
Need to automate that. Yeah. All right. Let's thank you all for joining us. Nath, do you find anyone that we can raid, or it's too
I'm
slim
rapidly
pickings?
hunting, but I've got nobody at the moment.
Okay.
Thank
well,
you
too
everyone
bad.
for coming and joining us, sitting in for this marathon stream.
Yeah, thanks everyone. It's really great to see you all, and thanks for joining. Thanks for sticking with us through such a long one, and we can't wait to release V9 to you all early next week. Stay tuned for that.
Oh wait, I got a Foundry streamer at random.
Okay, good.
I'll DM you a link.
Yeah, do that, and then let's just all go drop love on this person who's using Foundry, who probably has no idea what's about to happen.
Threw it at you on Discord. They're about to go from 8 followers to whoever, or 8 viewers to whoever else is with us.
Okay. Let me... Alright, I gotta see if I remember the slash command for this. /raid, I think. Yes. I hope you haven't led me astray. Oh. Yes. Okay. Okay. Is it happening? Is it going to happen? Yes. We are rating LOL ghosts. Everyone stick around and just give them a ton of love for using Foundry VTT. Just put those FVTT emotes up there and yeah, give them a little bit of love. But thank you all for hanging out with us. It's been great to show you all this stuff, to answer your questions. And again, we really look forward to the V9 release coming up early next week, and we hope you do too. Some quick advice for you when that comes. 1, back up your data. We can't stress that enough. Take a backup of your data. Step 2, when you first update to V9, you will want to disable your modules temporarily, make sure everything works okay, bring those back online piece by piece. Step 3, talk with us in Discord if you find any feedback. Anything you need to share, we will be here to help you as long as you've backed up your data. If you didn't back up your data, you may be screwed. All right, that's it. We're going. Farewell, everyone. Take care. We're out.